Yeah, live. Hi guys.
Hello, humans. Hello, humans. It's a little tiny bit stormy out there at the moment. It looks more wet than it actually is. Anyway, I needed to do this fairly quick. I'll probably have to take a break because I'm a
Hey Diane, good to see you. Hope you had a good Christmas.
I got a pie in the oven, so I've got in about 20 minutes. I've got to go check it and probably take it out at that point. It's a sheet pie from the huckleberries, which are really ripe at the moment. Okay, so some more complicated time stuff. Kind of cool, sort of interesting, especially for us guys involved in it. There's a video out there with Dick Allgaier interviewing me, and that video is from some time back. I think it was like 2019.
Yeah, I had a good one, Di.
That we did that. But to be honest, I haven't been thinking about times that way, so I'm not really sure when it was done.
Last time I streamed this, they stopped the stream straight out, so I'm wondering if they're going to do it again.
Okay, but here's the thing. Here's the progression of events. In the about the period of time that we had the 2008
crash, hey Bill, hope you had a good Christmas, mate.
Crash. We started getting in all kinds of new technology stuff in the data. This was also in that period of time where we knew there was new money coming, but we didn't know it was going to be called Bitcoin or cryptos or whatever, right? We just knew it was going to emerge, which it did, and so on. Within those same sets were other forms of technology that were being referenced. One of these other forms of technology that was being referenced is what we now call podcasts. Okay, a person to potentially hundreds of millions direct feed with no broadcast corporation in between, right? There is in the sense of YouTube or Spotify or that kind of stuff. So the corporations are trying to control it, right? Any organization will be infiltrated by the Elohim worship cult and used to their end. So anyway, so the data forecast this stuff that we didn't know was going to be called a podcast. The term was out there, I think, at the time that it first started showing up in the data, but it was as a descriptor that we were seeing it. So it wasn't linked to the term podcast. It had yet to cement to that. In any event, time passes, more data comes in, the descriptors for the technology firm up, and then we get to this point where like I say, about a year after the financial crash, so about 2009, we get into a situation where there's a forecast of a temporal marker. Now, you have to understand something about the data sets and why temporal markers are really important. Okay, so all of the time components within the data are calculated based on the duration of emotional impact for a word in that context, as the weighted indices algorithm is applied to it. Okay, so I had to come up with these numbers, and so I would go through long lists of words and say, oh well, that word under these contexts would have this sort of a long duration, and then I just take a stab at it. Eventually, we codified on some ranges. Okay. And so it came down to immediacy language, midterm language, and then long-term language. Long-term language and midterm language were separated at about 19 months. But there's sort of an overlap on all of this. What the process is to go through and get all this language off the internet, go through the pre-processing that sucks out the potentially
precious stuff,
then apply these constraint processes to it. And in the constraint processes is one of those that figures out the time impact of this word in that context in this particular set, because it's going to vary. So you could have trial, okay, just as an example word. You could say, if you had the word trial and you had it associated with by fire, you would say trial by fire. The fact that you have that by fire there shortens its potential impact emotionally, because
Lord, Shawnee has asked us to pray for a friend who's having bad problems with her kidney, I think it is. Yeah, kidney, and she's having seizures, or he's having seizures. Lord, can you go in and stop the seizures, please? There's no need for the seizures. Can you take the seizures, please? In your name, amen.
you're talking about an analog to a real world kind of a thing where you had a trial by fire and you're not sitting your ass around waiting, right? The trial by fire is a quick kind of a thing. Or you could have a legal trial. So if you had legal trial in there, that shit might drag on for decades. So you see that the word itself could have various different temporal connotations at any given point relative to the discussion. You get the idea. This applies to all the descriptors, mainly the verbs, adverbs, adjectives, and then ultimately nouns as descriptors. Okay, so in the data, so that's that. All right, so there's two aspects. Well, there's actually three aspects, but there's two major primary levels of processing for the data processing stuff I do. One of which is to examine all the words, just as I said, that would ultimately lead to the duration amounts being calculated, summed, averaged, et cetera, right? Then there's also this other aspect of that, and that is the context. Now, I did not write a natural language processing AI the way that chat is, for instance, right? Where you could talk to it in quasi-English. My approach has to do some of that work, but I didn't do it for an interface for me because it wasn't necessary. All right, so the part of the processing is still requires the language part of the processing to identify with and get connected to language that is understood, so to speak, right? It's not understood by the software because I had to put all that shit into the database. It was understood by me at the time that I made these cross connections within the database.
Wow.
So, but to a certain extent, we humans can think of it as a software processing the context or processing the read, the data that's been captured to try and achieve an understanding of the context, okay? And then that is applied to the words that are then being summed for the duration. I hope that makes sense. Basically, it's a very sophisticated form of a computer-assisted guessing on time. So sometimes within the data, occasionally we would get these things I would call temporal markers, where a data set would arise that had cross-links that were extremely strong and very clear, and these cross-links would each have a referential point to something occurring in time, okay? They wouldn't necessarily give you a day, wouldn't necessarily even give you a year, but it would say, basically, it would say, if this occurs, or when this occurs, then that occurs shortly thereafter. Or just before this manifests, look for this, because over here, because this will be manifesting just ahead of that. You can have, reading the data sets and so forth, and looking at the numerics, you could judge the temporal referential relationship between the various different data sets, okay? So, so if a data set popped up and said, you know, a specific thing, like the Costa Concordia. Okay, that was a prediction I made that was like 5 or 8 months ahead of time, in which I said there was going to be a blonde on a boat that was going to cause problems and mayhem. It was entitled, a little section in the report was entitled "Blondes on Boats." And it happened. Okay, a blonde was taken up by a captain on the Costa Concordia cruise ship, and he got to fiddling around with her when he should have been fiddling around with the boat, and falling over. Okay, so we had that was a temporal marker because there were things that were connected, especially crypto at that time, within my data processing that said when the blondes on the boats things happen, this other stuff's going to happen. And so we were able to say, okay, maybe we had like I think we had 5 or 8 months, I can't remember, lead time on the blondes on boats. There was a distance after that within the data sets that appeared to be about 3 months. So we knew we had about 3 months for this other stuff to pop up. That's pertinent in a second. Anyway, so, okay, so that would be a temporal marker, right? Once it's happened, then this other stuff is more likely to occur. And it's not the blondes on boats must have happened for this other stuff to have happened, but in our predictive linguistics, they were linked temporally close enough that the algorithm was associating them within a specific period of time. I don't want to get into details and drive people crazy. Okay, so there's so much we don't know about time. There's so much we don't know about the ability of predictive linguistics relative to the mass psychic impressions. And I was just guessing for time on all of these words, millions of things. Okay, it was automated. It didn't go through millions, but nonetheless, it was quite the tedious thing. It took years. Okay, so we have a temporal marker that originally showed up in the podcast thing in 2009. Okay, in 2009, it started shaping up as a temporal marker that would be almost impossible to miss should it ever arise. Okay, and that this temporal marker was going to be as I couldn't.
Diane, that last link's on my laptop, but it's not on my tablet. I wonder why.
The word big.
Yeah, I just showed up then.
And Dick Allgaier reminded me in the interview that it was going to be basically iconic, and that's what it is. Okay, so the temporal marker that we're discussing here is a Rogan-Trump interview, right? Or Trump being interviewed by Rogan, or discussion, or however we want to talk about it, right? On the Joe Rogan podcast. Now, this is pertinent because I'd had this percolating since 2009, and then I had at some point later on, I'd gone and I'd put in a request with the Future Forecasting Group, as they're called now, and talked to headquarters and got them to do a future forecasting sweep on my situation. Was this thing going to occur? Damned if they didn't nail it.
Yeah, Shawnee, he's opened 5 portals. That's pretty crazy, isn't it?
You should go look up that video. If I get my shit together, I'll put a descriptor in under, or put a link in under the in the description for this video. Anyway, so Dick Allgaier comes back with drawing Trump and Joe Rogan, the whole damn thing, right? And so at that time, we just at the time of the video that Dick Allgaier made, and going into the interview with me, it was a temporal marker, but the interview never happened because it was all about the debate. But you'll see in the discussion I had with Dick that I didn't expect the debate to occur because my data set clearly showed that it was just the two of them, that this iconic mano-a-mano thing was going to continue on for like a long fucking time as the icon for the turn, right? For the fourth turning, for the turn of so much relative to the chaos that's in our world now. And so it's going to be a really cool temporal marker to observe, and a very important one, perhaps the most important one that I had ever had forecast within that in the data sets, even more important than Bitcoin or any of this other shit, right? At that level. Okay, so that was 2009. We go to 2019, and Dick and I have our interview about it, but it doesn't happen at that time, right? Because the debate never happened. A pre-presidential election debate, right? Maybe it was 2020. So, but right in that time period. Okay, now it's 2024, and we have this same temporal marker of Trump and Rogan, but as a duo, right? Not as part of a debate, showing up. So we're back to the temporal marker, and they've now confirmed that they're going to do this. I have no idea what day or anything. I'm out of the loop as far as that goes. I don't get a chance to really catch up with a lot of that.
Shawnee, I looked into it. I've got about 3 videos of this guy. I've got about 3 lined up. I've looked into the basics of it. They're doing the alien deception. They're doing it now.
I'm so busy around here that all I can do is sometimes I turn stuff on and I sometimes catch a little of it, on the audio as I'm passing through. Okay, so now let's understand a few things here, okay? No, we'll get to that in a second. Okay, so at the time that I did that in 2009, I'd been working with this guy since since 1999. Okay, this was my Igor. We called him Igor. That was a fake name, right? He didn't want to be associated. He had a professional career. He didn't want to be associated with this lunacy. He didn't want his name attached or whatever, right? And he had other issues. So anyway, so he's been anonymous. We go along. We make make this thing work. He works with me for a better part of or more than a decade on the thing. As the data wrangler, right? He was doing a lot of that aspect of it. And I was out writing the code and stuff. Anyway, because of the situation now, okay, so Igor and I parted ways when I had to shut my process down after the heavy hand of censorship run up into 2017. So around 2012, well, actually around 2002, the censorship started rolling in. I knew this because I was tracking the Department of Defense introduction of the flat Earth meme as a PSYOP in 2002, and I started writing about it, and it got heavy-handed shut down. It was like canceled everywhere. I would post it, and it'd be taken down almost immediately. Didn't matter where, right? There were very few outlets at that time. Substack didn't exist, and all this kind of stuff. I put it on my website once, but I was dependent, and we got hit by DDoS attacks you would not believe, and so I took it down myself just in order to get that bandwidth free because I needed it for the data stuff. Anyway, so so the censorship clamps down on me too hard. I had other issues there. I was still in the process of the long 30-year process of discovering. I wasn't inclined to go and fight a lot of stuff at that point on this level for this stuff. And so my assistant here, Igor, was quite happy. He had purchased a lot, like buckets and buckets and buckets of Ethereum. And he was happy as a clam at high tide. And so it didn't bother him that we were shutting down. It wasn't a real problem for him. Anyway, he got hold of me the other day as a result of this temporal marker, as a result of of him hearing about Trump and Rogan. He's not in the country. There was a slight delay on him finding this stuff out. Anyway, he gets hold of me and he wanted to remind me of something. It's like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Okay, so so he retired. He's happy. He's living in a tropical paradise. He's one of probably the top. I'm certain he's one of the top % richest guys on the island that he's living on. Anyway, so, but he was letting me know, hey, remember that. See, we didn't keep the data. It was just too voluminous and the resources were thin. I didn't have vast quantities of storage, nor media, nor the ability to keep it safe, right? I live out in the Northwest and the conditions can be quite hard on electronics and data. Anyway, he reminded me about this thing, about at the time in 2009 that the temporal marker is now labeled as the Rogan Trump interview temporal marker, which is now identifying the time we're in. That was linked to Bitcoin prices and all different kinds of stuff, right, in those data sets going all the way back to 2009. Bear in mind, I think it was 2009 that they released the white paper with Satoshi's name on it. So we didn't even have Bitcoin software or mining or anything at that point. Anyway, though, so in that original temporal marker data set, there was this stuff, and Igor, the reason it really stuck out in his mind was because he and I fought about it for so much. Well, not fought about it, but argued over
Good, Irene.
how it would have to be interpreted, okay? Because I use a strict denotation, a strict interpretation of a word based on its absolute definition, in terms of correct grammar and so on. So, what we ended up doing was doing it my way. I was paying the freight, but the word was melee. Okay, M-E-L-E-E. This is a word that is basically military in origin in terms of its use in the English language. And Igor was in the Air Force. Okay, so I don't mean to laugh. I don't mean to be denigrating about it, but they don't teach history of combat or any of this kind of stuff that I knew of to Air Force non-coms, which is what Igor was. He was a non-commissioned officer, a data integrity specialist, all other kinds of cool stuff. Basically, though, as I understand it, he spent a lot of his time in the Air Force playing poker. Anyway, so melee has a very specific meaning. Okay, so a melee is not just a bunch of guys standing up and flinging and fighting, right? So it's not a big knockdown, drag out brawl in a tavern or something. People put the word to it, but that's not accurate. Okay, it is a military term. A melee is when an organized act of warfare, an organized combat activity degenerates into what we think of as like a basic brawl. Every person for themselves, any weapon at hand.
It's called a rout.
Totally disorganized, completely disorganized, last man standing wins kind of thing, right? Or fight your way out to survive kind of thing. A famous melee is Custer's Last Stand. Okay, General Asshole Custer. He led an organized troop, and then they made their battle plans and stuff when they were knew they were going to be attacked. And in the end, it degenerates down into hand-to-hand fighting with no organization at all, no one able to direct things. Okay, and so basically it's that aspect of it that Igor and I were discussing. So first off, note that you convert or it transitions. A combat action transitions into a melee by the control evaporating. Okay, and everybody's on their own after that. It's okay. So all right. So it's the control aspect of it that's the issue. Okay, we're going to come back to something else in a second.
At Officeworks, we won't be beaten on Boxing Day prices. Get an Acer Nitro V gaming laptop for $897 or a Samsung Galaxy A16 for $347. Make bigger things happen at Officeworks.
Save 30% on average when comparing Carmel with Skyscanner. And enjoy that wind in your hair feeling.
Sorry, guys.
Barbecues galore, epic Boxing Day deals are now on. Up to 50% off Big Grand Barbecues. Up to 50%.
All right, so Igor and I, he wanted to make melee temporally show up over here in terms of its representational, or in terms of its input on our temporal range. Okay, in melee, there's a lot of words that basically are describing a condition that existed prior to this word manifesting into our reality, right? So there could be a huge amount of fighting, and then it degenerates into a melee. So you can't say that, the melee part is the beginning of anything. The melee is actually the end. It's the degradation of the fighting, even in large combat, like Navy boats. Melee is a naval term. It was also been adapted to the Army, etc. But it meant naval vessels fighting at abnormally close quarters, right? Them and all different kinds of stuff. So anyway, we had this situation after the Joe Rogan interview in our data back in 2009, and was confirmed before. And it was one of the reasons I did it. It was confirmed before I commissioned the remote viewing guys to have a look, right? I wanted confirmation of what we were seeing. I mean, I don't follow politics. At the time that all this was going on in 2009, Trump was not even a figure in any of this. And Joe Rogan was, but he wasn't like a big major thing, right? So I didn't have any hooks and any personalities involved. It was just two cutouts, just two placeholders, two variables for me, what turned out to be a podcaster and the president of the United States that were just going to blow the whole thing wide open. The reason that this is the case is because that TM.
I still don't understand how he come to this conclusion. Like, he's explained it, but I still don't get it. What's the formula that made him arrive at that?
Had a lot to do with the UFO discussion, right? And the secret technology and all of this kind of shit. That's why in the data sets, it became such a standout, such an iconic temporal marker, was because it appears just ahead of sci-fi world starting to manifest. And it is such that 100 years from now, people can go back and look at this video, look at the interview itself, and know that that was the absolute threshold being crossed as we move into sci-fi world. Okay, so that's set up aside. So I'm talking with Igor, and he reminded me this, and to be honest, I'd totally spaced on it. But that was the reason that I had contacted Dick Allgaier and his remote viewing guys, was because we'd had that melee thing back in 2009, and in 2000, I think probably about 2015, maybe it started really picking up again, and I'll describe that in a second. And so I was prompted to get hold of Dick Allgaier as like sort of a sanity check on what I was seeing. Anyway, and so we had this situation within the data in 2009 that had been reinforced over the years from 2009 through to 2015 that said that 39 days after this TM took place, we would have and this is where Igor and I did our fighting, we would have this visible contention that would dissolve into a melee. And at the time, and even in our conversations here recently, he wanted to say, and I'll title this way in honor of Igor here, but he wanted to say that it was 39 days to melee, which is a catchy phrase. Okay, be a nice title for a book or something. But in my opinion, that's not quite accurate, right? Because we don't know what the distance is between the organized visible contention that then degrades into the melee. That might be months for all we know. But what we do have some justification for suggesting is that there will be 39 days between the temporal marker of the Trump interview and the appearance of this visible contention. And we're not talking, people taking on migrant gangs that are taking over apartment buildings. That kind of visible contention may well be in there, but the stuff that had been motivating me to get hold of Dick Allgaier was the visible contention between space aliens. Okay, so, or whatever, right? alien reproduction vehicles or whatever the hell. Who knows what's going on? Because we can't validate any of it at this point, right? But the data set said that 39 days after the this temporal marker, giant, huge, iconic temporal marker, to be honest, I never thought I would live to actually see it occur. In the interview with Dick Allgaier, I was, had just gone,
Yeah.
was hanging on and entering into the recovery period, right? And so that took 2019, 2020, 21, and about half of 22. Then I was fit enough to go on.
Okay, it's clear enough, guys. Hang on.
The rebuilding of my fighting frame by way of building an Aikido body, they call it. And you have to go and understand Shinshin Sutsu Aikido, Tohei Sensei, O Sensei, Ueshiba, O Sensei, and the techniques. Okay, and I'm 71 now, and I'm able to rebuild muscle mass, right? It is tedious, it is work. So it's not like it's a pill or anything. It doesn't work that way. But in any event, so I did all of this, right? In this intervening period of time here. Okay, so now we have this temporal marker appearing, but at the time that Dick and I were doing that interview, I knew it would occur, but honestly, 2019, I wasn't sure I was going to survive, right? I was hopeful that there wouldn't be any more crises, but you just never can tell, right? Anyway, though, it was pleasing to have lived at least that long that I saw the linguistics about that temporal marker appear in the media. Now we've got that same set of linguistics again, and apparently we have confirmation that the interview will take place, and therefore we'll have it as a temporal marker itself. And so that sets going a sort of a timer. Bear in mind what I was telling you about how we get these times, right? It's software adding up all of this shit based on all these words, and we're constantly wrong to some great degree. And it varies based on.
So that's how we done it. Okay, now we know.
Processing it takes and yada, yada, yada. So it's not, it's not like any kind of guaranteed date or anything, right? It is just, I am alluding to the possibility that there's a short period of time between the, barely over a month between the temporal marker and the visible contention that will appear in the skies that from the descriptors we had back in 2009, will go to the idea of UFO versus UFO and UFO versus jets. Okay, so like sort of very complex kind of Independence Day kind of shit, right? Nobody will know who the hell is doing what with whom. Now, okay, so you think that's unlikely and so on, as do I. All this shit's always unlikely until it happens. Possible, not probable, right? So anyway, now we have a strange thing where there's swarms of 20-foot drones flying around military bases. So unknown. Nobody knows who owns these drones, who's controlling them. At least they're not telling us guys. I would suspect that the military would be freaking out if they can't see the signals that are directing those drones, and those drones are
autonomous.
What is it? A Kavas weapon, where one of the I won't describe it, but basically you set off a group of drones that don't report back to headquarters until they're all done. Okay, they don't ever say anything back to headquarters at all. All their communications are between the drones. If drone number one that's leading the pack gets taken out, just like a flight of geese, then the number two takes over, et cetera, et cetera. That's a particular kind of a design. I worked on something like that in the 70s and implemented it for some software for the Department of Fisheries in the late 80s, okay? And that software ran 25 years without needing servicing, so to speak, and didn't break down because it was redundant, because it had, if the number one computer went down, the number two took over. And they talked to each other intermittently to say, yeah, I'm here, that kind of thing. So everybody knew what was going on. This is pre-internet. The internet came along, and it was just cheaper to discard that software and do it in a web-based interface. Anyway, so we now have those kind of drones doing their own. I'm going to go get that. Hang on a second. Doing their own controls, and so it's quite possible we may end up with one of these melees. I'll be back in a minute.
Oh, wow. Scared the shit out of me.
There is an urgent recall on solar home batteries. Affected batteries may overheat and catch fire, resulting in property damage, injury, or death. If you have an affected battery, immediately switch it off until it is remedied free of charge. Search LG Home Battery Recall to check.
We're on fire. Huge drop into the water, total chaos.
Sounds wild, especially over the loudspeaker.
Good job, everyone. That was a drill.
Not thinking straight? A Dare Fix will fix it.
What? That didn't run out, did it? Oh, that didn't run out. Okay.
This FBI guy, he's saying that the drones are carrying hello humans, December 22nd, maybe it's a couple of minutes before 9. I don't have the clock illuminated here in the car. Raining like hell, all kinds of weather, all kinds of weather. Anyway, hey guys, it's Melee period. Happy Melee, or is it Merry Melee? Never can remember. Anyway, we've got unidentified flying objects as well as drones. Many of the unidentified flying objects are these plasma balls, which, you know, so there's a guy, I think his name's D'Souza, ex-FBI guy. He's saying that the drones are carrying radioactive dust. That was the sort of goal that that he's describing that the cabal wants to use these drones for. There's a bunch of issues though, right? Okay, so out there somewhere, I mean, there's like 100, 200 new videos every morning of UFOs doing weird shit, drones doing weird shit, all kinds of things up in the sky. Very much a melee condition. No one knows what's going on. No directing authority over all of them. Anyway, there are a couple of these videos of these drones. We assume it's a drone, dispensing something, you know. They're not spraying, they're just like opening up containers and letting the shit fall down. And so I've seen one of those where it was quite clear that that was what was going on, even though it was at night. And then there was another one where, it could have been that, but it's hard to say, right? The quality of the video, etc. So we're going to have a lot of these disputed visuals as we go forward. I do not believe this is going to slack off, okay? It's going to get a lot more intense. So, like I say, I think his name's D'Souza. I'm uncertain. Anyway, he wrote a book. He predicted a fake alien invasion, right? As we all have known, was in the cards. However, we're not in that fake alien invasion. In my opinion, my data is more accurate than the previous predictions that are coming up out of the conspiracy world regarding Project Bluebeam and so on, right? And that makes you have a tendency to think that this is all man-made, even though they're using reverse alien technology, okay? Reverse engineered alien technology. So even though that is the case, the supposition here is that this is all of human manufacture and that it's all intended on stopping the Trumpitos, the Trumpsters, from taking office, right? Because when Trump comes in, it's like 3,000 people are going to come on in and start kicking ass. And the cabal cannot have these people come in and kick ass because they will reveal all of the evil crimes of the cabal and arrest a bunch of them. And then in the revealing of the others, we'll get the top dog cabal and all the way down
If Trump's going to do that, it's too late for the cabal already.
to the, ballot harvester kind of guys. So down all the way into their level of organization will be exposed, as well as will all of their crimes over these past 120 years. Since 1913, really, with the Federal Reserve. It's all been criminal since then. It was a crime getting it in place, and then they took off on that ethos and have been, basically criminal Elohim worship cult guys since then. So we have this situation where, as I say, I don't think this is going to slack off. My data says that we're going to have that this is going to continue. It's going to wind down a little bit, and then there's going to be this new flurry of stuff in January. Whatever it is that comes up in January, in terms of an emotive meme, so to speak, that theme will reappear again in July. So we've got to just bear that in mind, right? And so I don't think the drones are going away anytime soon, or the UFO activity, because it's more than just drones. And I do think that we will have a much larger exposure and discussion of this probably by February. Okay, so it'll be 100% mainstream 24/7 probably by February as we get into this shit.
Wow.
And it will be about so maybe it'll be like the 10th or 11th of July, somewhere in there. We'll take the next escalation on this. And in my opinion, the data suggests that escalation at that point will be going towards the idea of space aliens, right? What they're calling non-human intelligence. And that these space aliens will be involved with the deep state trying to do their op. It does not serve the space aliens' interests to allow the deep state to do their radioactive mass casualty event at this time, right? Doesn't suit the space aliens at all in their agenda. They've got shit they've got to do. So it's going to be complicated, right? There's going to be complications running around. You won't know. It's actually a complexity. It's so complex, but it's going to present complications to you because you'll think you'll see something simple on the underside, like the deep state doing their Project Blue Beam, fake alien invasion and stuff, right? I think that there's a portion of the deep state that's doing that, a portion of the cabal, but it's not coordinated, it's not organized, they're not putting in the effort that they need to, and there is no evidence so far of a follow-on, an after effect. They don't have anything in place now that they need in order to do their control system. So I dispute D'Souza's claim that, or his supposition or speculation that we're going to have these drones drop tons and tons and tons of radioactive debris all over the East Coast and get many, many, many people sick, okay, and try and do a kind of a thing. I dispute that. The reason I dispute that is that we don't see and haven't seen for the last year the ramping up and the manufacture of hundreds of millions of, we also don't see hundreds of millions of positive pressure air filtration systems being built for those hazmat suits. So if the deep state's planning on it, they haven't even geared up for that kind of shit yet, right? So it's not going to do any permanent. They're not going to do any good if there is no mediation, right? So when you get hungry and you're starving, you'll go out of your house to get food, whether or not. And that's what they're facing. And they don't have the suits, they don't have the distribution system or any of that stuff set up. So it's not going to happen. Their plans are just so squirrely, and they're counting on all of these migrants to be an effective chaos force, right? And that's going to be difficult. It's difficult to assault people in their home ground when they're prepared to defend that home ground, right? Basically, we've got nowhere to go. So that aspect of it aside here, right? Hang on, there we go. There's all other kinds of ramifications for these observable UFOs, right? Whether it's a drone and you don't know that it's a drone, or whether it's an alien or a UAP or whatever the fuck it is, and you just don't know what it is. It's an unknown, and they're up there in quantity. Like, so probably the other day when I thought I was seeing lightning, it was probably one of these UAP incidents off the West Coast, because these guys are coming up and they're just lighting up the area. I have not seen them. I'm not usually up at night, right? I go to bed early and get up early. So if they're going to be doing that shit, they got to be doing it at 3 in the morning if they want to catch my attention. Anyway, so there's all kinds of ramifications that have already been set in motion. So let's just pursue the idea that it's drones alone, that there's drones and plasmas that have been created by the deep state and are being used against the population, right, in a psychological operation that may later on involve a mass casualty event, okay, or an attempt at one. Even so, right, even if this is a case, even if it's drones and these plasmas created from deep skunkwork kind of shit, reverse engineering space alien craft. So we've seen the UAP hearings where we hear these people say that. Now we have demonstrable proof, right? And they're flying over our heads, and they're staying up a lot longer than a lithium battery would allow. And they move at 3,000 miles per hour. So that's not normal drone. That's not a quadcopter. All right, so these things are proof of reverse engineered alien technology. Well, okay, because now we all have to acknowledge Jews have no God, okay? The Jews do not worship any form of a God. The Jews worship the Elohim. The Torah Jews worship the Elohim. It's written all throughout the Torah, Elohim this, Elohim, that Elohim. Yahweh's an Elohim, Michael's an Elohim, Elyon is an Elohim, Gabriel is an Elohim, or is an El, the Elohim means plural, means many L's. But anyway, so the Jews worship space aliens. So they played the Jews. They've been playing them for, millennia. They've been directing them, pulling them, and all of humanity through them. So now all of this shit comes out. And so if Israel thought they had problems before, they don't have any legitimacy. I'm going to just laugh. If any time I see a small hat person come on out and do any kind of an observance in public, I'm going to laugh. I'm going to just give them such shit for praying and hymning the space aliens, right? And from now on, for me, rabbis have no credibility whatsoever. These guys are ritual-minded stooges. They're not even up to the minion grade for the Elohim, right? They're stooges. And Rebbe does not mean a wise man because he's worshiping these space aliens. So, So, and there's a difference, right? So if you know that there's an ontology out there, and that ontology is talking to you, that creation, however you want to phrase it, right?
Oh,
A
come
God,
on,
in my
Molly, I'm
opinion,
sick
is
of
something
picking
that
you
people
up.
create inside the material. So obviously, it is not the creator of the material where we find ourselves. That being the case, so creation, I call it the ontology because we're all seeking to determine the limits of our existence and what it means and shit. But creation talks to me. I've trained myself through Shinshin Soitsu Aikido to listen, right? And Shinshin Soitsu Do is the non-martial arts form of Japanese yoga. And you do these same kind of exercises and you learn to listen and see when universe is talking to you.
No, yoga's dangerous, so I disagree with him here.
And so, so universe has been talking to me about this shit, right? And universe, not a space alien. It's not inside the material. And so I can quite happily say, I don't worship universe. I don't worship creation. I serve it. There's a big difference, right? Creation doesn't give a shit if you put a label on it, give it a name, or pretend that it's got a dick and balls, right? It has no gender, doesn't identify as any of this shit, and it does not care about your individual opinion, about your
this guy's in the yoga,
personality,
which we don't like, of course.
What it thinks about. It's about the creation and supreme consciousness and all of that. It does not give a shit. We are not important to it at that level, right? It has.
Okay, I'm not going to listen to any more of that. Oh, hang on. I'll jump ahead of it.
Save 30% on average.
Doesn't identify as any of this shit. UFOs are flying over your head and can and hover stationary.
That's what we want to hear.
We're gonna, ding dong the cross dressing.
Yeah.
Anyway, this could upset all kinds of people.
Okay, yeah, enough of him.
And they apparently moved out to the coast where I was, and there were reports of it.
Oh, went the wrong one. Oh, that's the same one. Okay. That's all I got on him then. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? There it is.
But for the full interview, you're going to need to check it out over on the app. We have everything there. But right now, get ready to have your socks rocked. God bless you guys, and let's roll with Avi Lipkin. Hey, everybody, welcome to Hope for Our Times. And let me tell you, I have a guest on today. Never had him on this program before. We've met before, spoken at conferences before, but I've been following this gentleman for decades.
Oh, right. The screen's not frozen. I thought it was frozen, guys.
I have a guest on today. Never had him on this program before. We've met before, spoken at conferences before, but I've been following this gentleman for decades, and that's not an exaggeration. Avi Lipkin, he's joining us all the way from Israel. Thank you, Avi, for joining us.
Great to be with you.
Now, this is fabulous. So let's just get this whole thing started with a bang, literally with a bang. And then I'm going to do a little bit more of the introduction to you. But just so everybody knows, so Avi, I was listening to a cassette of yours back in 2001. That's way back, almost 25 years ago. And I had followed you. I'd followed Chuck Missler in the 90s. And you had mentioned a September 11, 2001, that there's going to be a terrorist attack. World Trade Centers were going to be hit by planes that were going to be taken by these terrorists. And I think it was in August that I listened to it. And then come around September, it happened. I just find that very interesting. Many people, they've called you a prophet. Avi, I'm going to turn it over to you. What do you have to say about that? And then we're going to work right on through to where we are today.
Okay, well, firstly, I have to tell you that I met my wife on a bus 55 years ago, and it was a marriage directly from God. It was, anyway, my wife got a job. She worked 35 years as an intelligence gatherer for the Israeli government, the Israeli radio. And she'd come home every day from work and say, I don't understand my bosses. I pick up all this information, and they want to use it. And she was picking up 5 years before 9/11 that they were going to attack the World Trade Center. She'd, write everything down, type everything down, give it to her bosses at the Israeli radio. They were all socialist leaders there. And they looked at what she wrote, and they crumpled up the page, and they threw it in the garbage. And they said, the Arabs talk too much. They'll never do it. And my wife said to them, listen, I'm picking up the information. My job is to give it to you. What you do with it is you'll be punished by God if you don't use it. So she gave it to me. I put it in my very first book. It's Fanatic Islam, A Global Threat, in 1997. Everybody attacked me. They said, I was against the Muslims. And anyway, finally, what had happened, they said, Avi's a prophet. I said, I'm not a prophet. I just listened to my wife. I would not have known this had I not married Rachel. So anyway, I have to add another thing also, that there's a very famous counterterrorism expert in Washington, D.C. by the name of Stephen Emerson. And he prepared in 1993, he prepared a PBS 1-hour video called Jihad in America. And at that time, in 1993, it was right after the first attack on the World Trade Center, in which Ramzi Youssef built a truck bomb and it blew up under the World Trade Center, killing 6 and injuring 1,000 people, but the towers held. And so he was explaining why, if at first you don't succeed, try again. And so it was a given, together with my wife's information. Listen, the World Trade Center was scheduled to be toppled on Wall Street, literally a crash on Wall Street. And the plan of Saddam Hussein at that time was to destroy the American economy. I was just reporting on the information I was collecting. Intelligence is like a jigsaw puzzle, and you put all the pieces together and you get a picture. The problem is certain people with preconceptions, they don't want to accept it.
Ooh.
So here in the States, you have a lot of people that say that it was staged by the U.S., the World Trade Centers. I hear a lot of different conversations on it. What are your thoughts when you look at that, when you hear those things?
Listen, you see the killings going on around the world. You see Muslims, you see ISIS beheading of Christians and Jews, Yazidis, Shiites. Then the U.S. military goes into Syria and Iraq to wipe out ISIS. Now you have the Shiites doing the same thing under the direction of Iran. There's so much crazy stuff going on, which is not like what they were saying about the alternative theories about the World Trade Center. Islam is the threat. There might be some shenanigans here and there, but I don't waste time with these conspiracy theories. I deal with Islam because Islam is so crazy, and yes, they do want to conquer the world. I would say one thing about the globalists. The globalists do exist. And it could be that the globalists will use the craziness of the Muslims for red flags.
Yeah. I would say that's definitely a
part of the agenda.
More than a probability appears to be going that direction with open borders and different things. But apart from that, let me go back to the Obama administration. He makes an agreement with Iran for the nuclear issue. gives them billions of dollars. And at the same time, I've read and watched different podcasts that Obama's intention was to create a new Ottoman Empire over in the Mideast with Iran in charge of it. So if Israel wanted to do anything, they'd be subject to both Iran and the U.S. Do you know anything about that?
Well, firstly, let me go back again to my wife. My wife, Rachel, picked up a broadcast. I don't, do you know Pastor in Florida, Milton, Florida? My brain is not functioning. I'll remember his name in a moment. And he picked up something that I did with Gary Stearman. At that time, it was Prophecy in the News. Today, Gary Stearman is with the new name, with a new group called Prophecy Watchers. I love them very much. And what my wife picked up was that President Obama, in his very, very first action after he got inaugurated in January 2009, he went to Egypt. And he met with students at the Cairo University. He met with the Egyptian foreign minister also. And then we're going to come back to this in just a second. Carl Gallups. Okay. The pastor I'm talking about is Carl Gallups. Anyway, he picked up what I did with the pastor, with Gary Stearman. So I think what happened was that, there was a TV. Again, all of this is in Arabic. My wife is picking this stuff up. Nobody in the Israeli radio wants to listen to anything she's saying. But what happened was that the Egyptian foreign minister was debating with some Muslim Brotherhood people in 2009, right after, was it after the, the years are going by.
Yeah.
And the Egyptian foreign minister said to the Muslim Brotherhood people, you guys are crazy. You got to calm down. Don't worry about Israel. President Obama was here, and he said to me that he said that don't worry about Israel. We have the elections. I don't know when you're going to air this, but elections are coming up on Tuesday in 5 days. And I don't know, even if Trump wins, will the Democrats take this quietly, or are they going to pull a red flag? There might be a red flag plan. They've got 2.5 months to establish military, left-wing military law in the United States.
Oh, this is a month old. I didn't realize.
We've got to pray for Trump's victory, and then we've got to pray for Trump to stay alive until January 20th. So, I've been watching this. I'm 75 years old. I've been watching all these elections. I voted for Trump 3 times. My son Aaron mobilized 100 people to send in their absentee ballots to the United States. So,
there's no point watching this. This is pre the election, so there's no point watching this. The beginning of the end, Jack Hibbs. We like Jack Hibbs.
Listen, before we get things going here today, very, very unique day. All because of the news of this entire week. It is absolutely snowballing.
This one's 2 months old.
To the point where you can't keep up with it all. It used to be news would happen, news would break, that it would be something that you'd maybe report on once, 2, 3 times a year, or maybe once every 2 or 3 years. Then it has come down to reporting on a biblical worldview, Bible open in the news, in months, and then weeks. Now it's by the hour. I know I look thrashed this morning. I'm actually 29 years old. I've just been up since 2 a.m. That's why I look the way I do.
Actually, I've seen this. Bear with me, guys.
There's no time to sleep anymore. God is getting his people ready, and that is on both sides. God is getting his people ready in the church, and God is getting his people ready in Israel. God is going to work, and it's happening right now. And so this week has been an epic week. It has caused global anger and rage, and yet at the exact same time, it has caused global and epic rejoicing. You're going to hear this. You're going to be quite surprised as to who's rejoicing. But God's on the move. And there are overwhelming reports around the world, but Tremendous reports from the Middle East, Iran, Syria, Israel, Turkey, Egypt, where people are coming to know the Lord. And it is not a small amount of people. It is not a small amount of people. So not only was this week an epic week, as we'll hear today regarding the advancement of Israel in dealing with Hezbollah, which was an absolute, unbelievably, it had to be a God thing because it was so weird. It was so weird for Hezbollah to get involved. They inserted themselves into a fight that had Israel focused on the south. And in 1 week's time, Israel's longtime, decade, perennial enemy was decimated, and the leader of Hezbollah, Nasrallah, was destroyed the other day. And we're going to talk about that, why it matters. And if for some of you who are saying today, I don't like the way the tone of that is, let me put it to you in a biblical tone. If King David were here today, he'd be walking around with Nasrallah's head. We don't want to hear that in a time like this. It's because we're what my flight instructor used to say. Jack, the guy in the tower, you better pay attention. Because the guy in the control tower is fat, dumb, and happy. He goes home at the end of his shift. You're still stuck up here in the sky. And a lot of people in America and in the West are just that way. They're just content and everything is fine. As long as I can get a donut or my coffee, I'm good. Well, friends, that's not the way the world is going right now. And in several locations in the world, we're at war. And this is a critical time. On top of all of it, God in his orchestration of bringing us to the 11th chapter of the book of Romans at a time like this is not by our choosing. If you go here, you know this. The timing of this is impossible. And then the events that are transpiring around the world, the events that are taking place with Israel, and the events of what is called the church in America. When I say the church in air quotes, the church that says it's a church, but it turns its back on Israel, is no New Testament church. These are prophetic times. And on top of all of that, what a week for us to make a huge addition to our Real Life Network team, and that is we now have a full-time journalist, three-time Emmy Award-winning journalist that by God's grace, we just stole from Newsmax.
Sean, you have no idea.
And has placed him in Israel, in Jerusalem, as our director of news. And so I want you to see our first news broadcast from Jerusalem. So put your eyes to the screen.
Israel's patience with Hezbollah has run out. We're standing in central Tel Aviv. This bustling street corner is directly across from military central command. And today, the IDF is conducting new airstrikes.
Okay, I wouldn't call it a bustling street corner. There's two people walking on it.
Destroying the infrastructure the Lebanese terrorists have spent 20 years building. The Israeli Air Force hit over 1,600 Hezbollah targets on Monday, killing, according to the Lebanese Health Ministry, over 500 people. The Israeli offensive meant to stop the daily rocket fire from Hezbollah, 9,000 since October 7th, and also to return the 60,000 Israelis who live on the Lebanese border back to their homes. Thousands in South Lebanon heeded the warning from Israel by text and by phone to get out of harm's way, while Israeli forces destroyed weapons depots in private homes, apartment buildings, where Hezbollah was storing heavy weaponry. Here's the chief spokesman for the IDF.
In these images, you can see how Hezbollah hides long-range rockets
with range of hundreds of kilometers. You can see here that the rocket is stored on an hydraulic system and is prepared for a launch out of an opening in the roof. Under this attic, a family lives and serves.
We actually seen this one, guys. Okay.
It drops, it's like grabbing onto a seat with a tornado. We're gonna drive the speed of light.
Got an amazing video for you today, my friends. We're going to look into what is really going on with regards to what's being seen in the skies over New Jersey, the time that we're really in, which I believe almost no one seems to understand, and we're going to get into it. I'm going to show the receipts. All right. I believe that what we're seeing here with these orbs is not something from another planet. All right. I think we're looking at interdimensional beings. I believe these are some sort of spiritual beings. And I think I know why it's happening right now. Now, of course, there are some people that predicted this would happen. Matter of fact, there was even a guy who retired from, it was one of the recent, I think it was something Patterson Air Force Base, the one that recent, it was like a week or two ago, one of the first air military bases to actually be affected by these drones and orbs. There's a guy that retired from there, and I actually covered it on a previous video. I might actually have it open still here because I got so many windows open. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, it took me a while to find it, but here we go. Here it is. All right, so this guy here retired from the base
in 93.
Okay, here we go.
1995.
Let's see if I can find it.
Patterson Air Force Base.
Yeah, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. That's what it's called. This guy retired from there in 1993. And he was saying in his essential farewell speech,
completed his
this. Let me just play this one and we'll listen.
Slides with the following quote: "The U.S. Air Force has just given us a contract to take ET back home." He also mentioned, "We already have the means to travel among the stars, but these..."
So he says that we already have the means to travel among the stars. He says it's all tied up in these projects, Black, of course, projects. And then he goes on, and there's another guy that says that all this stuff is going to be known in 2025. So they had this stuff already set up. They already knew this was going to occur in 2025. Now, what I think is going on here is I think we're seeing something that happened 500 years ago. Let me show you that. So back in 1561, there was a celestial phenomenon.
The only problem with this guy is he thinks we've already lived 1,000-year millennium. He thinks we've already lived it.
Went on over to Germany. And I believe that was the end of the White Dragon's time entering into the Red Dragon. Now, if you've never watched my channel before, you have no clue what I'm talking about. There's this concept, this ancient concept of dragons vying for power over the world. And a very commonly well-known dragon is the Red Dragon of Revelation. That's the bad dragon. Okay. The Book of Esther talks about this in a chapter that was removed. And this last chapter of Book of Esther is called Mordecai's Dream, where he dreams about two dragons vying for power over the world. And one was an evil dragon and one was a good dragon. Now, the evil dragon is the red dragon. And even King Arthur and Merlin the magician, they also had a dream. I think it was Merlin that had the dream of two dragons. One was a red dragon, one was a white dragon. And it basically was talking about,
you know, King Arthur's last name was Pendragon, so goes to figure, doesn't it?
He was around the time of 500 AD. So basically it went from the red dragon to the white dragon during the Middle Ages. So 1,000 years of the white dragon. We've been under the red dragon for 500 years, from King Henry VII until now. That was around the time of this. So I believe what we're seeing here, and this is just kind of my theory, is sort of a celestial battle in the heavens, meaning these spiritual entities vying for, of course, power over the world. It might sound strange, But this happened before, again, 500 years ago. This happens every 500 years, where they fight for power over the world for 500 more years. And I can actually tell you the history. 1000 BC to 500 BC was the red dragon. 500 BC to 0 AD was the white dragon. We know this from the Book of Esther. I've covered this before on my channel. I show how we have the exact same celestial, we have the exact same solar eclipses dates, the same dates as 480 BC, the time of the Book of Esther. The exact same days for every single solar eclipse in 2024, verse 480 BC. That was the time when it went from the red dragon to the white dragon because Esther saved Israel. And then 0 AD to 500 AD was the red dragon. It says in scripture in the NT, New Testament, that the God of this world, which actually the word is age, the God of this age is the devil, meaning the red dragon is over the world for 500 years, from the 0 AD to 500 AD. 500 AD to 1500 AD is the millennial kingdom, 1,000 years of the white dragon. We're in the time after that, the 500 years where the devil has a short time, according to Revelation, and we're at the end of it. We're at the time where the Gog and Magog happens. And I'm going to actually show all of this. I'm going to show all the evidence for this in this video. But what I wanted to get into is I believe that's what we're seeing with these orbs. Some very bizarre, we have people tracking them out in the ocean now near New Jersey.
Gosh, that thing is right there at us.
And they
Hey, you Mike, good to see you.
Joe Rogan had an expert on, a former jet pilot, saying that these things do not behave like drones. They move too quickly. They stay in the sky way too long. Even the ones that appear to be drones stay in the sky way too long. And another thing is I saw an orb morph into a drone, which is another very bizarre thing. Makes you wonder if these are actually drones or pretend drones. It's another thing. I'm like, what's going on here? And there's ones now dripping molten metal as well. It's
I've
so
seen
bizarre.
that one, yeah.
Some of the stuff. Check this out.
This is getting insane. Somebody just recovered molten metal that was dropped from a drone that was
they
hovering behind
recovered
their
it.
house in Wickham, England. The user posted these pictures on Reddit.
So what's really interesting about this is every time someone posts something like this and it goes viral, they usually delete it or they're told to take it down. I'm talking about the people that actually make the footage, that actually post it. So this person actually deleted their stuff. They first put all this information over on Reddit, and then they deleted it. It's been deleted. And this has happened many times. There's actually people that have posted on X saying that when they posted their video, they were visited by the police later, or agents telling them to delete their footage. It's very curious because, of course, everyone's seeing this, so I don't know why they're even trying at this point. I mean, it's not like it's not happening everywhere. Again, this happened 500 years ago as well. You have these drawings of what it looked like. If I can get it on the screen, there we go. Very bizarre. Matter of fact, I just saw a video of several orbs in a row all together, moving in unison, just like this shows here. I just saw a video in some guy's backyard, and it showed like 5 orbs just like literally moving in unison together in front of the camera and in the back in a way like this. It was really bizarre. And I just noticed that this has 5 of them in a row too, like just like it did in that video. It's really weird. Now, again, we have also videos like this where it shows them moving, and it looks similar to how the Ezekiel's wheel was described. It also reminds me of that movie Contact, where they have some weird contraption that's shaped like this as well for time travel in that movie. But it's just really bizarre. People talking to them. And I think these may be actually interdimensional beings. We have here, of course, Wes Huff explaining a little bit about this as well, about angels.
But these are these characters which the Book of Enoch is trying to make sense of, along with demons. And so the way that they go about that is by capitalizing on the events that happen immediately before Genesis chapter 6 and the biblical flood.
He's talking about Mount Hermon and the watchers coming down, 200 of them. I did a video a week or two ago about this. Just look for the one with the Mount Hermon on it, picture. Go check it out. But in this video, like I said, what I want to do is I think what's going on here is a lot of people already knew this was going to happen. Matter of fact, my researcher was telling me this even. And I think it may be tied to this, that maybe this is something that happens every 500 years, that these things are in the sky sort of battling it out. It's kind of like the white dragon versus the red dragon, spiritual forces fighting it out.
Possibly. I
in
don't
the heavens.
disagree.
Now, it sounds strange, but actually it's not just over New Jersey. It's actually over several places at this point. It's actually in other countries now. It's over Air Force bases in numerous countries. And I think, though, the devil's trying to use this to sell us something else. He wants to sell the whole alien story, that we need to be saved from ourselves because we're gonna have world WAR and it's our fault and we're just bad people, right? This is kind of like, I feel like where it's going. Anyway, I wanted to kind of prove the time we're really in, because of course in church they just tell you about Left Behind and you're going to get beamed out of here, Scotty, and it's the end before, and the Antichrist is here, right? This is what they tell you now in church, but I'm going to show you in this video that happened 1,500 years ago. I'm going to prove it. I'm going to show a quote from that the Apostle John took from the Sibylline Oracles, showing what he believed. The guy who wrote Revelation, what he believed about Revelation. I'm going to show you that. I'm going to show you all the dates aligning with what the Apocrypha says and much more in this video. You ever heard of the Sibylline Oracles? And we're going to get into a lot from the Sibylline Oracles because apparently Apostle John quoted them in Revelation. I'm going to show you the quote, and no one knows this. And it tells you exactly when the Christ was coming. Okay? And it already happened a long time ago. Let me show you this. And of course, some of you are going to want to instantly turn this off. But I guarantee if you watch this to the end, you're going to definitely be happy you did. Because I'm going to show you so much evidence that this is true, it's going to blow your mind. All right? So, in reality, what happened was the Apostle John quoted from the Sibylline Oracles. Let me see if I can get this pulled up. This stuff's so hard to find. It's so amazing when I find these things that are these gems that are so difficult to find. So apparently there's these Sibylline Oracles. These were actually referenced and used by the early church fathers, like Tertullian, St. Theophilus of Antioch, etc., etc. These guys from the very early times, ante-Nicene early church fathers. These oracles are prophecies. It started around 200 BC to about 200 AD. There's a bunch of prophecies that called oracles. It kind of reminded me of the movie The Matrix with Keanu Reeves. The lady that, the African-American lady that predicts things, I think she's called the Oracle. And it's very similar to this. It's called the Sibylline Oracles. I mean, it's not similar to the movie, but it just reminded me of the movie because about the only other place I hear the word oracle I could think of was the movie The Matrix. So this thing's called the Sibylline Oracles. And it predicted Emperor Constantine.
Yeah, they were Roman predictions.
Okay. It predicted when the end would come. It predicted when the Messiah would come. Okay, let me show you all this. This is crazy stuff. Let me first show you the quote where Apostle John, read this. It's pretty obvious if you read this part right here. At that time, the Prince of Iniquity.
Sibylline, it's named after an actual female, Sibylline. She wrote something like 7 books on what's to come, and she offered to sell it to the Roman Empire, and they wouldn't buy it. So she destroyed 1 book and then said, "Here's 6 more. You're going to pay now." They said no. So she destroyed another one. They ended up coming on board. I think they ended up with 3, but they lost a lot of information with the ones they didn't accept.
Who will be called the Antichrist, will arise from the tribe of Dan. He will be the son of perdition, the head of pride, the master of error, the fullness of malice, who will overturn the world and do wonders and great signs through dissimulation. He will delude many by magic art, so that fire will seem to come down from heaven. You see that right there? Fire will seem to come down from heaven. I believe Apostle John got his text from this. You know why? This lady lived before him. I'll show you that. Here we go. When did Tiburtine Sibyl of Albania live. Actually, her name's Albania. I can't even say these words. The Tiburtine Sibyl, also known as Albania, lived in ancient Sabino Latin town of Tibur, which is now known as Tivoli. The Tiburtine Sibyl is said to have met with Emperor Augustus at around 27 BC to 14 BC, somewhere in there, and showed him a vision of the Virgin Mary and her child. This was before he was born. Predicted the birth of the King of Kings somewhere between, basically about 20 plus years before he was born. This was written down in the Sibylline Oracles, which again is a collection of prophecies. Obviously, John lived for quite a while. And they say that he was the one that, the Revelation was one of the last books written. I'm not quite sure when it was written. Okay, maybe it was written in 50 AD, 60 AD, I don't even know. But it's kind of hard to believe that she probably wasn't still around at that point. I mean, obviously she would have been at least, I'm just going to guess, she's probably at least 20 years old at least when she talked to Emperor Augustus. And that would have been around 20 CE. So by 0 AD or 3 AD, or actually when he was born in 3 BC, but let's just say 3 BC when he was born. So she would probably be at least 40 something years old when he was born, at least. And this is like bare minimum. So she might have been 60 or 80. I don't even know how old she was at that point. By the time that they wrote Revelation, she would have probably been 70, at bare minimum, 70 years old, probably. Bare minimum. So she was probably gone by the time Apostle John wrote Revelation. But she made the prediction before he wrote it. You see what I'm getting at? So we're going to get into, like I said, we're going to get into a ton of stuff. I wanted to play this clip here from Dr. Michael Heiser. Let me get it to the right place. Okay, I think it was around here. All right, here we go. Here we go. Let me play this.
I think pastors regularly underestimate the intelligence of the person in the pew. It really gripes me that sermon content is so dumbed down. I think it's insulting to many people in the pew.
Give us an example of that.
Just, basically anywhere, how no matter where you're preaching, the passage becomes about salvation, tithing, baptism, all the basics of the.
So like he's saying, basically, in a lot of churches, the focus is on what's in the now. Well, we need money for the church. It's about very basic stuff in your life. And they continually just drive home the same point using various scriptures. They're not actually getting into the scriptures and getting into the ancient history and things of that nature like you would expect or hope. Now, I saw this other clip over on the Deep End with Taylor Welch, where we have Timothy Alberino on, and he's talking about something in his book. Now, this is Welch basically quoting something Timothy Alberino said. Check this out. This is really interesting, and it tells you a little bit about our ancient history.
First and foremost, I want to start with the statement you made in the book. You said mankind did not invent civilization; he inherited it, and humans were not the first things on this planet.
That's right.
Most people who would call themselves.
So what's really interesting about this, and I started to realize this myself, and I talked about it recently in video, that there were these beings, he calls them the elder race. Timothy Alberino calls them the elder race, which I think is a good way to designate them. Because what the church has done is they call them angels, and which is a really bad way of doing it, because the word angels means messengers. It's a job. It's like being a postman. It doesn't tell you anything about these beings, who they are. It doesn't tell you, what their classification as a being is or anything, right? And they tell us in church, basically, time started with Adam and Eve. In reality, that's not the case. These beings, this elder race, we're the younger race. This elder race were around for thousands of years on Earth with civilization in place before we ever came along. And the reason why the devil did the things he did is because he'd already been around for thousands of years. He was already sort of the head honcho not the head honcho. Obviously, that's the King of Kings, or God. But he was like high up. He was high up on the stature as an angel, and he had gotten pretty big head at this point. And God himself told him to bow to man because man was made in his image, God's image. And he didn't want to do it. This is according to the book of Adam. And this is what led to him sinning, his pride, and what led to this ultimate, where he's basically trying to thwart us at every turn and moment, right? This is what led to him essentially hating us. So what's really interesting about this is the Sibylline oracles. Again, it's like 200 BC to 200 AD, a bunch of prophecies, talks about these beings. It talks about the Titans. And it's really amazing because it gets into Greek mythology. It talks about the primordial gods. And these are, okay, so the Sibylline oracles were used by the early church. Okay, a lot of the early church fathers loved the Sibylline oracles, thought they were inspired. Today, you've never even heard of it. And I always wondered when I remember way back in college wondering, how did the Greek myths fit into our faith? How is it this other religion that has nothing to do with our faith was created? It doesn't even make sense. It's because the devil has separated the facts of history from each other and replaced it with other things so that you don't know what's going on. So if God, Jehovah, created a spirit in earth called Gaia, not something to worship, but rather just a spirit, the earth spirit, and it even says in scripture, the earth cries out. What did you do, Cain, to Abel? It says that the earth cries out. How did the earth cry out if it's not real? If it's just a material object and there's nothing there? How did it cry out? Because it has a spirit. It's not something you worship. This is where the people fell. They started worshiping these beings, these elder race, these gods or titans, small g gods. They started worshiping them when they were not supposed to. You're only supposed to worship one God, the Jehovah, right? Or Yahweh, or however you want to call it. So it says in the Sibylline oracles that there was first the primordial gods, then they had a second race of gods that were offspring, and then there was the Titans that were offspring, and there were multiple generations of the Titans. And this is from the Greek mythology, and the Sibylline oracles talk about there is some veracity to these stories, that these beings were these elder race that had offspring. And this explains the book of Enoch, where these watchers came down and mated with humans, because they also could mate. They were beings. They had physical bodies, although some of them clearly had.
There's a Roman emperor, I'm not sure which one, but it was one of the later dated ones. And he wrote in the history that he saw a centaur that was in honey, a full-on centaur. And instead of alcohol preserving it, it was honey. And he said he saw a centaur encased in honey to preserve it. So that's pretty crazy.
Exceptional powers, some were interdimensional, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what's, I thought that was really interesting, looking into some of that. But getting into the specific prophecies in this part of the Sibylline oracles, this isn't even the entirety of the Sibylline oracles. No, what? Sections. They have a section where it predicts the Messiah.
Can you grab any?
A section that predicts the anti-one or Christ.
Can you grab any?
The Pompeii. What happened at Pompeii, that catastrophe that happened there, it predicts all these things. Okay, it's absolutely astounding. And the part that predicts the birth of the Messiah and the anti-one is the Tiburtine Sibyl prophecy, which is the one I've been talking about. The Tiburtine Sibyl, also known as Albania, was a woman who lived in ancient Sabino Latin town of Tibur. I told you about this, and she met with Emperor Augustus, predicted the Virgin Mary and her son. Now, Constans was the son of Constantine. So I don't know if she was referring to Constance, because she literally said the word Constance. And I'll show you that. Let me show you that real quick. Here it is. So here's the quote. Then there will rise a king of the Greeks whose name is Constans, which is either referring to Constantine or his son. Either way, it works. It's still the same thing in the aspect that they both brought forth Christianity to Rome. He will be king of the Romans and Greeks. He will be tall of stature.
Oh, man, they didn't bring Christianity to Rome. Rome was Christianity was already established by 64 AD when Nero persecuted us, way before Constantine.
Very handsome in appearance with shining face, well put together. After this, he will come to Jerusalem, and having put off the diadem from his head, laid aside the whole imperial guard, he will hand over the empire of the Christians to God and his son, saying that his empire will be dedicated to God, which is exactly what happened with Constantine and his son Constance. Then shortly after that, after this occurs, it says this, in doing so, he will give the way to the Antichrist.
Didn't Constantine kill his son Constance out of jealousy? I think he did.
At that time, the prince of iniquity, who will be called the Anti-One, will arise from the tribe of Dan. He will be the son of perdition, the head of pride, the master of error, fullness of malice, who will overturn the world and do wonders, great signs through dissimulation.
Yeah.
He will delude many with the magic art. Fire will seem to come down from heaven.
He does, Shawnee, but his mistakes aren't a threat against salvation, so we let him get some things wrong.
When the Roman Empire shall have ceased, then the Anti-One will openly be revealed and will sit on the house of the Lord in Jerusalem. This is saying it will happen shortly after Constantine. And this is exactly correlating with my dream. I had a dream about this as well. And this also specifically matches the timeline set up in all the apocryphal literature as well, which I'm going to show you now. So what time frame did they tell you that we live in currently? Let me show you this. So they tell you that we live in this year. What year is it on the AM calendar? They tell you that you live in 5,785. This is incorrect, and I will show it to you in a minute here. Interestingly, it says that all things will end in the year 6,000. Let me show you this.
Yeah, I thought so, Shawnee.
Here we go.
Out of jealousy, wasn't
the
it?
meaning of the expression "he finished in 6 days."
Hey, Rose, good to see you.
Finish all things in 6,000 years. For a day is like
Rose, did you watch that Wizard of Oz Z Code?
1,000 years with him. He himself testifies, saying, "Behold, today will be 1,000 years. Be as 1,000 years. Therefore, my children, in 6 days, that is in 6,000 years, all things will be finished." And I'll show you numerous things that back this up. This is the letter of Barnabas. Now, they tell you that we are in the year, where was it at? 5,785, which would indicate, if this was actually true, it would indicate that we have 215 years until the end. Okay? However, this is not true. This is a lie. And I'll show that to you now. So, interestingly, it also says that he will change the times and seasons when he comes. So, let me show you this. Let me find this. Seasons. Okay, maybe it's not here. Let me find it real quick. You'll think to change the times and seasons. Let me go find that verse. Change the times and seasons. Here we go. Daniel 2:21. He changes times and season. He disposes king. Oh, this is not it. Where is it at? They will think to change. Here it is. This is the right one. Daniel 7:25. And you shall speak great words against the Most High, shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. Okay? Talking about the Anti-One. Okay, so what time are we really in? Let me show you that. According to Theophilus of Antioch, we are in the year, and I'll show you this. I'll just show you the quote first. All the years of creation of the world amount to a total of 5,698 years, odd months and days. Theophilus of Antioch, AD 169. So if you subtract 169 from 5,698, you add in 2024, you get the year 7,553. That would indicate we are 1,500 years after the end. Does that make sense? Does that sound crazy? Let me explain. The end was at the fall of Rome, 6,000 AM. Then there was a millennial kingdom called the Middle Ages. Medieval times was 1,000 years long. That's the millennial kingdom, referred to in Revelation. After that was 500 years. It says that the devil will be let out for a short season. After the millennial kingdom is over, he'll be let out of the bottomless pits for a short season. Short season is probably less than a day. 1 day equals 1,000 years. It's been 500 years. It's been 500 years since the millennial kingdom, and he's went forth to deceive the nations. I would say he's done a pretty good job of deceiving the nations. He's done a pretty good job. So in reality, and let me show you this in other ways too. So if you look, this is where they changed the times. How did they get it from 7,553 to 5,785? Well, here's one of the things they did. They literally deleted hundreds of years off different people in the genealogy. Right here, you can see it. The Hebrew Masoretic, they deleted hundreds of years off these people right here. The Greek Septuagint, Samaritan Pentateuch, Flavius Josephus, a historian, all agree this is the correct time frame. This is the modified one called AM3. This is AM1. I can show this in the Encyclopedia Britannica in a second here as well, proving this. But here's even more obvious way to prove it. Here's the correct one from the Septuagint or Flavius Josephus. You can see the normal progression of people being born, fathers dying before their sons. The father dies, the son lives longer, etc., etc. See that? Looks kind of like an angle, right? Here's the one that they tell us today, which is everywhere. Notice it's not in a line like that anymore. It's some weird cockeyed thing. You see that? They deleted hundreds of years in here. So they could put Melchizedek at the time of Abraham. And there's a reason why they did that. It's because they wanted to disprove the King of Kings as being of the order of Melchizedek. So these are people who didn't like him, the King of Kings, and they were trying to disprove him. And for some reason, the church accepts this these dates. That doesn't make any sense. Why would you accept something like that? It's a modification. So they actually modified time. And I'll show that in the Encyclopedia Britannica now, which used to be on your bookshelf back in the old days, no longer there anymore. Now we got Wikipedia. So interestingly, they talk about AM1, AM2 in the Encyclopedia Britannica. Let me show you this. This is around the time of the fall of Rome. And I'm going to show you who is the beast of Revelation. I'm going to prove it very, very elaborately in a second here. It works. It makes perfect sense when you see it all. I'll actually I haven't done this before. I'm actually going to show you way more details than I have in the past. So here we go. This was around the time of the fall of Rome. However great or successful with theologians their approaches were, they merely delayed the problem. Despite pagan and Christian belief in Roma Eterna, eternal Rome, the empire would fall, no matter how far away. 6,000 AM, AD 500. This is AM1. This is the calendar you can't find anywhere anymore. This is the one that puts us at 7,550 right now. So no matter how far away 6,000 AM, 8,500 seemed from 5,700 to 200, it did not seem so far away in the 5900s, 400 AD. Indeed, the Western Roman Empire faltered just before the year 6000 approached, turning the anti-apocalyptic sabbatical chronology an imperial obstacle to Antichrist exegesis into profoundly apocalyptic ones. At the beginning of the 5th century, AD 59 AM, Jerome and Augustine, perceiving the danger of apocalyptic millennialism, developed a new and more stringent way to oppose it. Jerome introduced a new set of calculations called AM2 that placed the incarnation 300 years earlier, meaning he literally, lack of a better term, lied about when the King of Kings was born and placed it 300 years earlier just so people would stop thinking the end of the world was coming at the fall of Rome. Why would you do that? Why did Jerome do that? That's a good question. At the same time, he heaped ridicule and contempt on millennialists, the believers in foolish tales of earthly delights, gluttony, and sex. So this is talking about the millennial kingdom of 1,000 years, that they're going to have a paradise, as it says in Scripture, which was the medieval times. Augustine went still further, arguing that neither history nor chronology can be interpreted apocalyptically, and that the millennium was not a future event, but one that had been set in motion to explain the continued existence of war, hatred, injustice, poverty. Augustine used the notion of two cities.
Oh, he said it.
These were a heavenly city and the celestial Jerusalem. So one of his books is actually to sort of stop people from thinking that the end was coming. Why would these guys argue against what Scripture's saying? Why would they
Already said hello, Rose. That's why I wiped it out.
do that? It's a good question. Well, what is interesting is that St. Augustine, which I just showed you, and Jerome, who are both trying to get people not to believe the end was coming at the fall of Rome, were also happened to be friends with a man who ended up being Pope Sixtus III. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So, you remember the scripture in Revelation to watch out for a certain number. In the book of Revelation, the number 666, another 6 is referred to as the number of the beast. It's from Revelation 13:18. It says that you will not be able to buy or sell, save they had, of course, the mark. Now, what's really interesting is there's a legend that surrounds this Pope Sixtus III that he required a mark, of course, to purchase and sell, or to buy and sell. And this man, his name, Pope Sixtus, the number 6, Sixtus means the number 6 in English. Sixtus is Latin for 6, and it says 3 times. So Pope 6, and another 6. Interestingly, Augustine was friends with Pope Sixtus III. If you go ask Google AI, it will tell you, yes, St. Augustine of Hippo and Pope Sixtus III were friends and corresponded frequently. Before becoming Pope, Sixtus was a prominent member of Roman clergy and a patron of Pelagius. Now, this is really interesting because it says in Scripture, the beast shall rise from the sea. Now, the word Pelagius means of the sea. Yes, the name Pelagius means of the sea. So, as you saw back here, Sixtus was a prominent member of Roman clergy and a patron of Pelagius. He was under the tutelage of Pelagius, and he turned on him. It says in Revelation that the beast rises out of the sea. In the book of Revelation, the beast rising out of the sea. So he rose and turned against the sea. He rose out and left the sea. The sea was Pelagius. Pelagius was who he was under.
The Pope's name is Francis Bergoglio. There's Gog right in the middle of his name, and I think he's a false prophet, so it suits.
The teaching of, and he turned on Pelagius and joined St. Augustine. So Pelagius, so the beast, Pope 6 and another 6, turned and left the sea, came out of the sea of Pelagius and became the beast. We're talking of Revelation. This was all in 440 AD. Around the exact time the Sibylline oracles say the anti-one would come. And it also correlates with all these apocryphal texts that say that at the year 6000 will the end come. Now, let me just show you this. So we have these texts like first Adam and Eve, second Adam and Eve, talking about after great 5 days and a half, concerning which I've made a promise to thee and thy father, I will send my word, the Logos, to save thee and thy seed.
Yep.
This is in second Adam and Eve, an apocryphal text, saying that at the year 5500, that's when the sun will come. And we see it here in the book of Adam. When 5,000 years will be completed, then at the 5,500th year, the beloved Son, the Messiah, will come upon the earth, and he'll be baptized in the river Jordan. It says the exact time that he will be on earth at the year 5500, using the original timeline. That was around exactly 0 AD. Okay, so then we go, and when does the end come? When does the end come? It comes at the year 6000. What happens at the year 6000? And let me show you this on another thing as well. I have another thing, I'll spell it out also. Right here. Attend, my children, the meaning of the expression, he has finished in 6 days. This implies the Lord will finish all things in 6,000 years. Coming back to this, 6,000 years, and Beliar said to Sheol, look carefully, who is it that, for it is Elijah and Enoch, or one of the prophets that it may seem to be. But Sheol answered death and said, not yet are 6,000 years accomplished. So Elijah and Enoch come at the 6,000 year point. The 6,000 year point is the fall of Rome, is Pope Sixtus III. Elijah and Enoch are the two olive trees before the throne that come and preach right at the end, which is the fall of Rome. You see how all this stuff correlates perfectly, unbelievably perfectly.
Yeah.
And all these texts say the exact same thing when you look into it. Now it says that there'll be a millennial kingdom, which is in medieval times. After that, there'll be a short season when the devil is released to deceive the nations. And it talks about him changing the times and laws. Daniel 7, and he shall speak great words against the Most High and shall wear out the saints and think to change the times and laws, to change the timeline, which has happened. The timeline did indeed change. Instead of it being AM1 like they thought 2,000, 3,000 years ago, instead, now they tell us we're in AM3, although they don't tell you it's AM3, and they tell you that we're at a time where it's only 5,000. Let me pull it up. I can't find the link. 5,784. What year is it on the AM calendar? Here we go. 5,785. This is what they tell us we're in. When actually, in reality, it is 7,553. And it's very difficult to find this information anymore, even though it was the standard 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago. They used this calendar, and it was removed. So, Ettering, I think you get kind of the idea. Now, this leads into a kingdom that was erased, of course, from history, which I've talked about on this channel, that happened during the medieval times. Rome was only a small portion of this entire thing. They're the ones that legalized the faith. But after that, there was a massive kingdom that was created. Tartaria, I've talked about it numerous times before. You can see it on all these old maps, but they tell you today, of course, it doesn't exist. It was merely Asia. But in reality, if you look at all these medieval maps, it tells you that they even moved into North America. They had a massive kingdom. It was the last great empire before Great Britain that no one seems to know about for some reason. And of course, if you look at if you think this is strange, let me show you the proof. This was taught in America's early years of creation. During the early days of America, they taught about this kingdom. Here you can read right here. Colonies, and I'll call them TARS. TARS colonies passed into America, as you can read there on the screen. Here's the first, this is an 1835 school book in the USA talking about them. The first sovereign who bore the title Tsar.
I'll tell you what, that is pretty interesting what he's saying.
Was Ivan Vasilievich the first, surnamed the Great, who at the year 1481 succeeded in freeing Russia from the dominion of the Tars. It was at this period the Cossacks first appeared in history.
Wow.
World War I was not the first World War. You can actually see it if you look in history. They just don't call it a World War. But they were all going in to defeat these Tars.
Definitely
around the world. And then after that, you never hear about them ever again. Who wins? The victor writes, of course, history. Very interesting. Why would they try to erase this? Perhaps it was the devil going forth to deceive the nations, because he doesn't want you to know about the past. He wants you to believe it never happened. And you're still waiting for it to happen. You're still waiting for this millennial kingdom. You're still waiting to be beamed up out of here, Scotty, as they say in Star Trek with the Left Behind series. They want you to believe you're still way back then, when it's already happened and we're in the time afterwards. And no one seems to know this at all. And I would say the smoking guns are things like Pope Sixtus III, which no one seems to know who he is, yet logically, this makes no sense. Because if you would read history and you heard that there was a Pope 6 and another 6, wouldn't you think that's striking and kind of important? You'd be like, whoa, a Pope 6 and another 6? I would remember that. How is it, when I look through Google, I can only find one book from like the 1800s that even mentioned his name? How is it no one else mentioned his name? Why is it no one knows who this is? It's absolutely astounding to me. This is when I know I found something. When I find something like this and you can't find any information on it, and it should be something everyone knows because of the just mere ridiculous nature of the name itself, should make it obvious. At any rate.
Save 30% on average when comparing Carlo app with Skyscanner, and enjoy that wind in your hair feeling.
I hope you're listening, because what he's saying is significant. All right, my dear brothers and sisters, we have arrived at yet another very, very powerful moment in time where we get to sit down and examine the scriptures, learning what God is saying in these last days. And folks, I have to tell you, the type of messages that God wants to continue to give us are absolutely astounding. And folks, I want you to understand just how critical of a time we are in. Look around at all of the things that have been going on. Look at what's happening in Syria. Look at how the whole Middle East is responding. Look at the stance of Israel. Look at what's taking place with Russia. I never thought in a million years we would see Assad, who's actually hanging out in Moscow right now, at least at the time of this recording. And there's so many issues that are happening where it just feels as though everybody is lying in wait and getting ready to stage things to the place where God is saying it's going to happen. And folks, everywhere you turn, you begin to see evidence that God's word is true. But sometimes it's really good to be reminded of that very important fact, because folks, things are changing so incredibly rapidly. And I have to tell you, God wants to make us a part of the plan that he has created for these last days. And folks, I can tell you that through the scriptures, we have some incredible examples on how to pay attention to God's voice when he's speaking. And I hope that you'll be paying attention to the next 25 minutes or so, because so much of what I believe God wants to tell us is wrapped up in us being willing to listen to what he's saying, and even more importantly, acting on the words that he shares with us. And so, folks, as we jump into this story about a very, very powerful and important man in Bible times, I want you to also understand the fact that he became who he was because of the hand of God working in his life, doing an incredible work. And by the way, today, the way that we sit in this very place, God actually wants to do greater things. And that kind of sounds crazy when you compare some of the works that God has done in the past with what he wants to do in the future. It kind of feels like, no way, God can do that with anybody except me. But God has an incredible plan. And I think that's what all of this comes down to. So in order to understand how to move forward, especially in these days, and considering the plan of God, I thought that it would be a really, really good idea for us to understand some of the patterns that erect when it comes to God speaking to us, and some of the patterns that should be erecting when we choose to listen to what God is saying. And I think that one of the great examples that we can pull here is from the life of the prophet Samuel. Now, first and foremost, I just want to simply say this. The fact that Samuel is even around at this point is a complete miracle of God. And I think that I can identify with this in that when I consider that the name Samuel is a part of my own namesake. When I think of the fact that my father's name was Samuel, Samuel's a very important part of my life right now. That name is really important. It's critical because when you even look at the very meaning of that word, which basically means heard of God, you'll recognize very, very quickly that the very name is indicative of the fact that God does listen to our voices. God does hear our cries. God does make radical and powerful changes when our hearts align with His, and God listens to the very concerns and cries that we have concerning the world around us, and even the personal issues that we face. Because when you look at the story of Samuel, Samuel is the result of a woman whose name was Hannah, who desperately wanted a child but could not have a child. Her body was not in that position to be able to produce a child. The Bible says her womb was closed up by the Lord. And what's really powerful is through her cries out to the Lord, through God hearing her voice because of the appeal that she made, God gave this woman, this precious little boy, this son named Samuel, which, by the way, Samuel had lots of siblings. That was later on in Hannah's time after Samuel was born. But God gave this precious boy to Hannah as a gift. And Hannah said, I will give this boy back to you, Lord. And that's exactly what happened. God gave this baby, this precious little baby, to Hannah. Hannah took that baby, raised that baby up, and the very point that that baby could be weaned from her, he actually was delivered right there to the priest, and the priest then was able to start the process of training this young man up to be the next prophet. And that's exactly what we saw happen here, and the story about it is absolutely astounding. Now, the one thing that I will say, and this should be a word of encouragement to all of you mothers and fathers out there, when you are godly, when you turn your heart to the Lord, when you seek God, you are already setting your kids up for the prophetic work that God wants to do in them. When the voice of the Lord is being spoken through your voice, when the heart of God is being communicated through your heart, when you continue to give your children a glimpse of all that God is and all that God wants to be to them, you continue to develop the infrastructure necessary to propagate the promises that God wants to give from generation to generation. And the idea behind this is, as we raise our children up to listen to the voice of God, as we raise our children up to respond to the voice of God, as we continue to teach our children the fact that they are miracles that God has given to us, perfect gifts that God has given to us, they begin to develop an inclination towards moving in the direction that God has called them to, and it becomes a very powerful and unique set of circumstances. And God is faithful in allowing our children to be molded through our faithfulness to Him. That when we walk in obedience to Him, and folks, if you raised up children and you were not raising them up in the ways of the Lord and you feel like it's too late, it's never too late. Because if your heart is turned towards the Lord now, then as a father or a mother, even if it's late in the season, even if your children are in their 50s, it doesn't matter, you can be an incredible point of contact to the Lord Himself through the life that you live, so that these children that you have, doesn't matter how old they are, can experience God through the very things that you do and through the examples that you lead. And I think that it goes a long way when you understand that principle, when you begin to realize the faithfulness of God, of what He's doing in these circumstances and all that He actually wants to do. So this is really important stuff. And Hannah, by the way, did exactly that. It's remarkable. So we find ourselves in a position where we are going to read about Samuel in 1 Samuel chapter 3. Now, there's a lot to talk about here in terms of what's happened, but the only thing that you really do need to know is that Eli is the priest that is taking care of Samuel, and Eli has some sons that have just completely rebelled against the Lord. These are guys that they're supposed to be priests, but they're sleeping with women. They're taking advantage of some really ugly situations and circumstances. They're not glorifying God. They're not taking care of the priestly duties that they're supposed to. And God has basically just finished proclaiming judgment on those kids and upon Eli and his whole family because of the ugliness that these guys brought to the table and how much it stumbled so many people around. And the Bible actually says that. So where we leave off, it's a very ugly point in Israel's history. It's not a healthy situation with respect to what's going on, of course, with the tabernacle. I always say the temple, but it's a tabernacle. But within the tabernacle, and I think it becomes even more consequential here because you have not just corruption within the midst of the people in the time and day in which this existed, but you're seeing intense corruption from within the infrastructure that's supposed to be provided by the Lord for individuals to get closer to Him. And so that's the type of thing that God hates, but yet it's the other thing that we look at to know that God will never allow that to just carry on and carry on and carry on without it being eventually checked. And so that's what we're seeing here, and that's exactly what's going to happen. So let's jump into verse 1 of chapter 3, and it says this: It says, and the child Samuel ministered unto the Lord before Eli, and the word of the Lord was precious in those days. There was no open vision. Okay, so this is really important because when it says that the word of the Lord was precious in those days, what it means is that it was rare, it was scarce. In other words, it was something that was to be greatly valued because God's word wasn't being spoken. God's word wasn't being heard. And the point behind all of this is there weren't any people that were willing to listen to the voice of God when the voice of God was actually being spoken. People were becoming desensitized to all the things that God was wanting to do. And guys, I just read the verse to you. I mean, honestly, there were no prophecies that were going forth. People were not hearing it. People were not communicating it because they had become so desensitized. And the Bible even tells us at the last part of verse 1, like I just read just a few minutes ago, that there was literally no open vision. That means people weren't having visions. God wasn't speaking to them. And it may be that God was clearly trying to speak to them, but as I said before, because of the desensitizing of the group that we're talking about here, none of this was actually happening. And it was very, very sad to see that the condition of the nation was as such, but this was the result of people choosing to allow themselves to become inebriated by the sin that was around them. And folks, look, I don't know about you, but it would seem to me that in the time in which we live today, God is speaking louder than he ever has. God is warning us more than he's ever warned us before. God is using all of the tools that's available, whether it be on the internet, whether it be on TV, whether it be the satellites, it doesn't matter. The things that are happening right now on this earth, the things that are happening with the nations, all of the things that are going on, God is using all of those things to speak loud and clear to us. Yet because of the desensitizing that's happening through the just adversity to righteousness, through the idea that so many people are embracing wickedness, the message is getting harder and harder and harder for so many people to hear. Yet God is communicating it clearly. God is telling us exactly what he expects of us. God is making it very, very clear what he wants of us and how he wants us to live. And yet we continue to choose to not listen to him. And look what it says in verse 2. It says, and it came to pass at that time when Eli was laid down in his place and his eyes began to wax dim, that he could not see. Okay, so this is interesting. The picture here is that Eli's getting very, very old, okay? And he's laid up in bed. He's not physically doing well. His eyes are getting dim. He could be having some sort of a cataract condition. We don't know. But something is happening where he's not able to see. He's getting older, right? And what's even more interesting is the fact that there's just this picture of him as being very fragile. He's not doing well. So he's laid up in bed. Look at this in verse 3. It says, and here the lamp of God went out in the temple of the Lord where the ark of God was, and Samuel was laid down to sleep. Okay, now I just want everybody to notice this. When it talks about the temple of the Lord, it's literally referring to the tabernacle. The tabernacle is oftentimes referred to as the temple of the Lord. Obviously, this is pre the time of David. This is a time when the temple has not been built. This is pre-Solomonic that we're talking about here. The tabernacle exists, but the temple does not. I just thought I would note that. So look what it says. It says, Samuel was laid down to sleep. And notice what it says in verse 4, that the Lord called Samuel, and he answered, here am I. Now, this is really interesting because there's a formula here that you need to understand. The first thing you need to recognize is God is always going to speak.
Oh, shoot.
All right? God is always going to speak. So then the next question is, are you listening? And in the case of Samuel, he was listening. God spoke, God called him by name, and Samuel answered, and he said, here am I. And there's a problem with this, because if the end of the story was that God spoke, Samuel heard it and said, here am I, then the natural assumption that we might make is that Samuel was responding to God, which he was, but Samuel wasn't aware that it was God that was speaking to him. Samuel wasn't aware of the fact that it was God who was raising his voice at him. And when I say raising his voice, not yelling, but in other words, his voice was being made to be heard. Samuel heard the voice, but he did not realize it was God that was speaking. How many of us are hearing the voice of the Lord, but because we become so desensitized to what his voice even sounds like, it's becoming muddled and confused with the voices of the people that are around us? We have to think about that, folks. Because if we believe that we're hearing the voice of God, then that means we need to allow ourselves to understand what it's like to hear that voice, to discern that it actually is his voice, and then to redirect our energy and effort and attention to that voice. Samuel didn't do that last part. You can't blame him. He's a kid. He did not know that it was the voice of God. He heard this voice. He thought it was Eli's voice. So he said, here am I. Look what he does after that. He ran unto Eli and said, here am I, for thou didst call me. And he said, I called not. Lie down again. And he went to lay down. So Samuel hears what he believes is Eli's voice. And what does he do? He gets up and he runs towards the voice. Because Eli's voice is trusted. He knows who Eli is. So he runs over there and Eli says, that wasn't me. Interesting, by the way. I think there are going to be many times in our life where we are going to hear the voice of God, thinking that it's the voice of somebody else. Going to that person's voice, speaking to that person and saying, here I am. And that person saying, you're a cuckoo, that wasn't me. I think oftentimes when we are met with that type of response, we get discouraged and we walk away because we fail to discern the fact that it was not another human's voice, yet it was God's voice that was speaking to us. I have many, many times conflated the voice of God, especially early on in my walk with the Lord, conflated the voice of God with what I believe was the voice that was coming to me from other people. Even the very voice of my own mind. God will teach me. Over the years, he has taught me. He will teach you over the years, like he probably already has taught you, that if you act on his voice, then he will always help you to understand where that voice is coming from. That if when you hear the voice, you act on it, God will always make sure, because of the fact that you are walking in good faith, God will always make sure that that voice gets redirected. That you will understand who it is that you're listening to. The problem is if you don't act on the voice that you're hearing, then you're going to have a bigger problem on your hands. But look what happens. Samuel acts on it. He thinks that it's Eli. So the Lord called yet again, Samuel. And Samuel arose and went to Eli and said, here am I, for thou didst call me. And he answered and he said, I called not, my son. Lie down again. You can hear Eli probably being endearing. Come on, man, I'm trying to go to bed. Go to sleep, honey. It wasn't my voice. I'm funny. Look what happens next. Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, neither was the word of the Lord yet revealed unto him. This is very interesting. Folks, I believe that just like Samuel, many of you could probably argue that you do not yet know the Lord. That as the Lord has communicated, you don't yet know him, which is why you think that that voice is somebody else or something else, and you respond a completely different way. But here's the one thing.
I'm pretty sure I know God's voice by now. I don't hear it audio like through my ears, but it's with the voice I think with.
That you can't argue. Here's the one thing that you cannot do. You cannot argue, like it says here later on in this verse, in verse 7, you cannot argue that the word of the Lord was not yet revealed to you. Because here's the thing, like, don't get me wrong. You can have the word of the Lord being given to you, and the word of the Lord can be revealed to you, but yet you've chosen not to pay attention to the revelation of that word, and you've hardened your heart. But you have to keep this in mind. The Spirit of God is living inside of you, and his responsibility, one of the many responsibilities that he has, is to reveal these things to you. And so when you receive the word of the Lord, if you do not allow the word of the Lord to be revealed to you, it is because indeed you are allowing other things to settle in, which is keeping you from experiencing all that God has for you. I think about this a lot. God speaks to me all the time, every day, but sometimes because of the condition of my heart, sometimes because where my mind is wandering, sometimes because of the way I'm thinking, I don't necessarily allow it to be revealed to me because I'm not paying attention. Yet God says it's right here, it's in front of you. And some of you might say, well, James, I don't have these telepathic powers, or James, I can't hear these voices like you can hear these voices, or James, that's not me, it doesn't fit that way. It's not like I wake up in the middle of the night to hearing an audible voice. It has nothing to do with that, because the greatest voice that you can be hearing right now is found in the Word of God. That as the word of God is being communicated to you, it is in essence a revelation of all that God has for us as mankind. And if you will allow the work of the Holy Spirit to move in your life, then the word of God will be revealed to you as you allow it to be.
Amen.
So at this point, Samuel did not know the Lord, and the word of the Lord was not revealed to him. But watch what happens. This gets really interesting. Because God will keep calling on Samuel until Samuel gets it. And I think he does the same thing with us as his children. Verse 8, and the Lord called Samuel again the third time. And he arose and went to Eli and said, Here am I, for thou didst call me. And Eli perceived that the Lord had called the child. So by the time it got to the third time around, Eli realizes Samuel's not a kook. He's not a nut job who's hearing all kinds of weird voices or whatever. Something legitimate is going on with Samuel, and Eli remembers. Like right at that moment, Eli, I'm not going to say remembers, he realizes at that moment, God must be speaking to Samuel. He goes, oh my goodness, this is the Lord here. So look at what Eli does. This is verse 9. Therefore Eli said unto Samuel, Go, lie down, and it shall be, if he call thee, that thou shalt say, Speak, Lord, for thy servant heareth. So Samuel went and lay down in his place. Folks, I think this is such a critical place for all of us to be in, especially if we're looking at teaching the next generation, especially if we ourselves are being taught. We have to learn to recognize the moments that God is speaking in the lives of other people, and we have to encourage people to respond to God's voice, even when they don't know it's the voice of God that's speaking to them. You see, Samuel didn't know God's voice. Samuel could not perceive that it was God's word. It was not yet revealed to him, but yet Eli does know God's voice. Eli has been around long enough to understand and discern what's going on. So Eli takes Samuel aside and he says, Samuel, the next time you hear that voice, this is what you need to do. Samuel didn't understand the ins and the outs.
It's New Year savings, and it's our best price ever. For a limited time only, the Clever Smart Pay is available for just $129. It instantly makes your old car feel like new. Get to Clever.
I was picking the dog up.
In the outs of that, Samuel didn't understand the theology of it. Samuel didn't understand all the specifics of it, but he simply chose to obey what Eli had told him, knowing full well that there was something to what Eli was saying. So look what happens in verse 10. It says, And the Lord came and stood and called as at other times, Samuel, Samuel. Then Samuel answered, Speak, for thy servant heareth. So this time, Samuel gets it. This time, Samuel hears his name, and the response that Samuel gives is, Lord, I'm here. Let me know. I'm waiting. And look what happens. This is verse 11. And the Lord said to Samuel, Behold, I will do a thing in Israel, at which both the ears of everyone that heareth it shall tingle.
Wow.
In that day I will perform against Eli all things which I have spoken concerning this house. But I begin, I will also make an end. For I have told him that I will judge his house forever for the iniquity which he knoweth, because his sons made themselves vile, and he restrained them not. And therefore I have sworn unto the house of Eli that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be purged with sacrifice, nor offering forever. That's a very, very heavy statement. And I think that this is what happens sometimes when we're willing to say, Lord, I'm going to hear your voice, and Lord, I want to listen to you. God will use the very fact that you chose to be open to his voice as an instrument, as a tool in your life. He will use this in your life to help purge the insanity that's going on around. You see, Samuel doesn't realize it at this point, but he's going to pick up this massive responsibility that's going to be left behind by Eli and his family being judged. Samuel is going to step into the place that he never thought he would step into. But because he's in this place where he's saying, Lord, I'm going to listen to you and I'm going to obey you. And the funny thing about this is Eli's being judged. His family's being judged. Why is Eli being judged? Eli seems to be a righteous guy. Well, he's not so righteous, biblically speaking, because he did not put a stop to the wickedness of his sons.
Oh.
He could have very easily told his sons, you're not doing this. And then he could have easily made an example of them. But he chose not to do it. And that blindness that was created by him not willing to hold God's standard, even in the lives of his children, was the very thing that pretty much got everything taken away from him.
Wow.
And I think this is really interesting because I believe that when God speaks to us, when we perceive his voice, when we hear his word, and when we act on his word, I believe that God will put us in challenging situations like this. I believe that God will put us in a situation where we stand as a functional repudiation of all of the evil that caused this nation to become in the place that it's in, even in personal situations, family situations, circumstances. God wants to take the fact that he is speaking to you, directing you. He wants you to be used by him in a way that will deal with all of the wicked things that we're all talking about here. And folks, this is not a difficult principle to understand if you understand God's heart and God's mind for you. If you recognize that it's God's heart and God's mind to be an extension of his hand in this world, then this stuff is not going to be foreign. This is going to be exciting stuff. This is going to be powerful stuff. And folks, I'm going to tell you this right now. There's such a massive tendency within the Bible prophecy world, as we call it, to look at all of the doom and gloom, to be distracted, to be bothered, to be even distraught because you know that the world is falling apart. And you know that so many things are happening that the Bible said would happen. But the one thing that we oftentimes forget when it comes to the subject of Bible prophecy is that in these last days, God wants to do miraculous things for us. He wants to do miraculous things in our lives. He wants to do miraculous things in our family. He wants to do miraculous things all over the world. God is wanting to take us in these last days and do things that are so unbelievably remarkable that it is dramatically and radically life-changing. And the question that I would ask you is this: are you willing to allow God to do something extraordinary? Are you willing to allow God to show up in a way that you never thought he could? Because if you are, then yes, it's going to be extraordinarily difficult. Yes, it's going to be harder than anything that you've ever done. I can promise you that. But the reward will be substantial, because when God shows up, there will be nothing like it. And folks, I'm here to tell you this. This is so important. Each and every single one of you listening, look at me. Look straight into my eyes when I tell you this. God wants to use you. Do not think that you're passed on because you're not like everybody else. If you are not like everybody else and you feel like you're different because of all these different circumstances, you might be the perfect candidate for God using you. If you're the type of person that says, well, God will do it with everybody else, but he won't do it with me, that means you're the one that God probably wants the most. My point behind saying this is God is in the business of doing miracles through people who are not likely to have miracles done. So I want you to look at this and understand and recognize the miraculous work that God is doing here through Samuel. Now look what happens. Because he hears this. It's a heavy judgment. It's a serious condemnation that's being placed upon Eli, the guy that taught Samuel. Look what happens next, verse 15. And Samuel lay until the morning and opened the doors of the house of the Lord, and Samuel feared to show Eli the vision. You know, this is something that I've learned, is that when God makes his word known to us, oftentimes we fear to show it to everybody else, especially when we know how powerful it is, especially when we understand what it all involves. Samuel knew what was coming to Eli, and the fear of God was instilled within him. I think that's an admirable characteristic. I think that sometimes when people see me speak, or they see other people like me speak, they think, oh, James just loves all that hellfire and brimstone stuff because he's so loud. Or James just, it's like something in him that just really likes to talk about this, all this negative stuff. When in reality, if you knew what was going on in my mind and my heart as I communicated these principles, you might not think the same way that you do for those of you that think that way. You would recognize that it comes with a lot of fear and a lot of trepidation because, oh my goodness, but by the grace of God, so go I. Or how about the fact that when I have to declare to somebody that something painful is about to happen because of the neglect that they've allowed themselves to be functionally given to, the pain that I feel in my heart in knowing what's coming is not good. It's not a fun thing. So the idea that Samuel feared to show Eli the vision, it makes a lot of sense. So Eli called Samuel, verse 16, and said, Samuel, my son. And he answered, here am I. And he said, what is the thing that the Lord has said unto thee? I pray thee, hide it not from me. God, do so to thee, and more also, if thou hide anything from me of all the things that he said unto thee. It's heavy. You guys understand what he's actually saying? Let me read it one more time to you. So hopefully it'll sink in. It's a heavy statement that Eli's making. I don't know if he realizes the extent to which the statement is being made. He probably does because God has already told him how he was going to judge it. He probably knows what declaration is coming. He can probably see it through the fear that's in Samuel's eyes. But let me read the verse to you again. And he said, what is the thing that the Lord hath said unto thee? I pray thee, hide it not from me. God, do so to thee, and more also, if thou hide anything from me of all the things that he said unto thee. You understand what Eli's doing here? Eli knows what's coming. Eli knows that it's going to be a curse that's coming his way. That's why he said, God, do it to you if you don't tell me everything God said. Can you imagine what's going through the heart right now of Samuel? I think for so many of us, as we're being used by God to give out his word, we're going to feel the same way. We're not going to feel good about declaring judgment on people's hearts and lives. We're not going to feel good about telling people that things are falling apart. We're not going to feel good about giving people a message that they're not going to receive well. None of us want to do anything like that. None of that is right in our own minds. It just doesn't make any kind of sense. It's a terrible way to go. But quite frankly, it's part of what we deal with every single day if we're walking in obedience to God. God is going to give us a message that isn't going to be the best of messages. But what if people were to listen to that message and God were to extend his grace and mercy? God is in the business of doing that. I am here to tell you that there are many times where I share the message and God wants to put upon my heart. I know what God is telling me to do, and I don't like sharing that message because I know what's going to come of that. And God says it's not for you to be concerned with. So, what does it say in verse 18? And Samuel told him every whit, and hid nothing from him. And he said, it is the Lord. Let him do what seemeth him good. And that's a pretty powerful statement that the priest would say. But what would you expect Eli to say? Let's read verse 19. And Samuel grew, and the Lord was with him, and did let none of his words fall to the ground. In other words, everything that Samuel said was taken seriously. Everything that Samuel said didn't go by the wayside. Every word that Samuel shared was honored by God. That's a pretty heavy place to be in, by the way, just so you know. I think about that oftentimes as I share the word with people, as I do what I'm doing right now. I'm like, Lord, please do not allow any of my words to fall to the ground. Please allow the weight of all of my words to be felt by the people that hear it, because this is your message, and may it always be your message. I think those are the types of prayers we need to pray. Look what it goes on to say. It says that all Israel, from Dan even to Beersheba, in other words, from the north to the south, knew that Samuel was established to be a prophet of the Lord. And the Lord appeared again in Shiloh, for the Lord revealed himself to Samuel in Shiloh by the word of the Lord. And there is something to be said about the man who gives his ways to the Lord and continues to be faithful to the Lord, and then God appears to him in a spectacular way. And I believe that God will do that with each and every single one of us. I think that as we continue to walk in obedience to the Lord, as we continue to be faithful, as we continue to say, Lord, here I am, I'm listening. Whatever you say, Lord, I'm here. I'm willing to do whatever you put in front of me. You know what God's going to do? God's going to honor you. God's going to bless you. God is going to allow his very word to be honored in a way that you never thought. And you know what he's going to start doing? He's going to start appearing to you. He's going to start making himself known to you. I'm not saying that you're going to see this big light around a shadow and all that. No, God appears to us in different ways. But I'm here to tell you that God wants to speak to you. He wants to make his word known to you. He wants to see you take a step of faith. He wants you, even when you can't see him, to say, yes, Lord, here I am. I'm ready to go. And when you hear his voice, he wants you to walk with that message with fear and trepidation. He wants you to be careful about the words that you say. And he wants to show up in a way in your life that will blow your mind and the mind of everybody else around you. So when we sit in this world that feels like it's falling apart, when we look at all the crazy things that are happening and what may be what the atrocious trajectories of everything, the path of insanity that's happening in this world, know this: God, like Samuel, wants to call you out from a crazy place, from an impossible place. He wants to put you in the midst of people who will fear him when you share his voice. And once that happens, he wants to use you the same way again and again and again and again and again and again. The question is this: will you let him? The question is this: will you allow yourself to become acclimated with this voice? The question is this: will you allow yourself to know and understand his word when it's spoken to you? Because if you will, God will do great things. Now, here's a question you might ask: how does that happen? Really simple. If you feel like you're hearing God's voice right now, respond with a simple statement, and that is, yes, Lord, here I am. And then start reading his word. Start trying to gain insight and understanding as in what he's saying. And then take the step of faith to do the very thing that you believe he's calling you to do. And I can make you this promise: God has yet to do some of the greatest things that we know he's going to do. So hold on to the seat of your pants and let God do something just incredibly awesome.
Okay, guys, one more. I'll hang up.
The Snooze Super Summer Sale is on now. Save up to 50% on selected mattresses. Plus,
as drones, right? We're like, okay, drones, whatever. Maybe they're looking for something. But now it's starting to morph into something else. And morph is probably the right word because we're seeing all these other things now. Just when you thought you'd seen everything, check this out. I have 3 different videos that are just going to blow your mind. We have here, it appears to be some sort of orb and a drone. And it appears that it knocks it out of the sky. Check this out. You can see it's coming up to it, or actually coming down to it, I mean, and interacting, the drone's interacting, and then next thing you know, there's the drone. It's gone. That one's kind of strange. Now, actually, this is the lighter one of the 3.
And we know someone went and collected that debris, and it was like melted steel.
We have other ones that are just even more ridiculous. This one, let's see if I don't know if this is on the screen enough. Hopefully you can see it all. Yeah, you see that plane up there? See it flying over there? You see it shot something, and I think it's taking out drones. There's another one. Very strange. So you have those 2 videos. Of course, this guy didn't apparently get it all on the screen, maybe because it's moving so quickly. But you can see the after effects of what happened. Now, the next one is pretty crazy as well. Let's see if it'll load. There you go. Okay, so this is some sort of missile being shot at, and I'm not sure in this case what this is. This looks like it could be a drone. Let me just show you this one. Let's see if we can back it up.
Going too fast
It's over
for a
the
drone.
water, New Jersey. It took it out. So I don't know what's going on, why this is happening. We actually have numerous videos like this coming out now. What's going on here? I don't think this is normal. Okay, I don't think this is normal to seeing orbs and drones and them taking each other out and jets flying around, taking out. Honestly, it's hard to tell what some of these things are. I'm guessing they're taking out drones or orbs. I don't know what's going on here, man.
Their sustainable food is eating insects like grasshoppers and that. That's their that's their idea of it.
It is very bizarre. Maybe you guys can tell me what you think in the comment section below. Orbs. We have this one that's just unbelievable. Okay, it's not an orb. I don't know what this thing is. This picture doesn't even tell you. Okay, when it's stuck in a tree, and when you get closer, it looks like a jelly blob. I am not joking. It's moving. It's got lights on it. It looks like a jelly blob with some weird. It don't look like anything you ever seen before. All right, it don't look like anything you ever seen before. Stuck in some guy's tree in New Jersey. Okay, in Florida, thousands of them, hundreds of them in the sky. Whatever these are. We got weird ones. We got ones where they're light flashing everywhere, like this. This is all happening, and it's not just New Jersey, although a lot of it is there. We're seeing them in lots of states, Texas, everywhere now.
I wonder why New Jersey. What's in New Jersey, guys?
Other countries even. This is not what they were telling us before. And we have a response from our GOV. You're not going to believe it's pretty hilarious. We'll get into that as well. Let's just start here. Let's start with the Amazon. Yes, just in time for Christmas. You're expecting all these things to arrive on time. They go on strike, of course. And I mean, honestly, this would probably be the best time if you're trying to, get something changed at Amazon, because you want to hit them while the time is the worst timing. So that they just like, okay, we'll just give you what you want. But apparently Jeff Bezos is not going for it fully, my friends. He's turned on the water over here. Apparently workers are standing strong, keeping the picket going, while Amazon themselves turn on a water spigot to flood them out. Stop striking, just go back to work, all right? So that's apparently how he's going to play it. I remember he's not exactly the most generous person in the world. I remember, I don't know if it was last Christmas or the one before that. He had a raffle for the workers, and the prize was a sandwich, a bag of chips, and a soda. And that was I mean, that like one person won that in the raffle. It wasn't like everybody got this. It was one person. That was the raffle, no joke. Let's just hear a little bit of what these workers say about what their working conditions are and all that.
This is my third holiday I'm giving to Amazon. I haven't been around for Thanksgiving or Christmas.
It's constant speed up for the holidays.
It's like twice as dangerous, I would say, because everyone's moving twice as fast and there's twice as much work.
Every horror story you read about Amazon is true.
Oh my goodness gracious. So of course, maybe they're just trying to strike so they can go to Christmas for once. I don't know. Maybe they're just not able ever to take Christmas off, Thanksgiving. Ebenezer Scrooge is running the company, you know. Little Timmy just wants to go to Christmas, and Jeff Bezos won't let him go, right? So, I mean, obviously they're looking for wage increases, and apparently they work them pretty hard, especially at Christmas. And they're saying all these stories you read online are true. I've seen some pretty doozy ones. I don't know about you, but there's some pretty crazy ones I've seen about Amazon. But so there's that. And we're going to get into a ton of stuff in this video. I got to mention, of course, this book here, The Lost Ways, How Your Great-Great-Grandfather Lived Without Electricity, out of bestseller. Do things around the house like they did in the good old days, hundreds of pages illustrated. You might want to get that. You never know what's next. Flooding, World WAR, orbs in your backyard. Who knows? I mean, at this point, we don't know what's going to happen next. I hope there's no orbs in your backyard. I really don't think so. But you know what I'm saying. They're up in the sky above New Jersey. It's wise to get this book just in case. You never know what's next. Always wise to be prepared. You can't buy this after the fact. The electricity goes out. Oh, I got to go buy it. Oh, I can't get on this video because the electricity's out. You know, so you might as well get the printed version. Get it right now. A link is in the description, $37 plus shipping. Also, Gold and Silver's link below. The giveaway is over, but there's some deals going on with Gold and Silver, Food Supply down below. And the link for Food Supply, I hope it's working. You know, it was working at least on my phone. It's not working on my PC. So if you got a phone, you should be able to buy some Food Supply if you want to buy that. 25-year shelf life. Link is in the description. At any rate, so let's get back to the video. So we have, of course, a lot of companies striking right now. We have Starbucks apparently doing a worker strike as well. A lot of people are not happy with their wages, and it has a lot to do with them printing money and giving it to their friends, these rich friends. Talking about the GOP doing this. And on that note, we had, of course, this ridiculous spending bill that they were trying to pass, which did pass, by the way, shrunk a lot. They were able to get things done very quickly. It's just amazing to me. Now that we have X, we have people who are able to put their voice forward. We don't have these ridiculous spending bills being passed anymore. Now they cut out, like, this is 1,500 pages. This is 116. They cut out 1,400 pages from this thing. And it was a lot of ridiculous stuff in there. A lot. I mean, full funding for a DC stadium. There was, like, you know, the whole passports. There's money for that in there. There's money for a group that goes around finding, you know, Ruslan, information. Ruslan, I'm talking about Russia. Yeah, so they had funding for all the things we hate in there, and they were able to get it cut out in no time flat. All that stuff removed, all of it, and this is probably the first spending bill almost in like a decade that's probably not full of garbage. I don't know, man. So that's some good news, right? We've got some good news out there. Then we have this. This is sort of something I used to talk about some years ago on YouTube. We have apparently trains of military, of course, vehicles going through.
Now that is crazy.
San Diego. Just tons and tons. It goes for a long time. Lots of different things in there. What is this all for? What is the reason for all this massive amount of military vehicles and equipment being moved? That's a good question. We don't know the answer to that yet. Maybe in due time.
And where did it get moved to is more important.
And we will know. But there's that. That's a pretty interesting video. Then we got this here. We're going to get into the drones, and actually, I wouldn't even call them drones at this point. It's so weird. It started off like a month and a half ago with just like a few drones, right? Then it became a lot more drones, and then it became some drones and a few orbs. Now it's becoming a lot more orbs and weird stuff and less drones. Okay, it is. It's literally becoming. It's almost like they were trying to get us accustomed to it. Like, you're okay with the drones? Okay, we'll bring out the orbs now. Oh, you okay with the orbs? Let's bring out the jellyfish ones now. I'm not joking. I'm joking and serious at the same time. Here's one from a plane. Some guy was recording numerous orbs following the plane, and it does it for a long time. Look at that.
Wow.
Now, these follow this plane for quite a while because they're even there at nighttime. Same plane. Check this out.
It was a very long flight. I mean, he started recording it during the day, and then he's still recording it at night.
This is from James LaFeur's channel. He's talking about what's going on with this video. If you remember that guy, he had the channel That Is Impossible. He also has a channel Jimas, I think it's called. Just go check him out if you haven't already.
Yeah.
But he's been around for a long time. At any rate, he's talking about some of these strange orbs. And what's really bizarre, I saw the most bizarre video. I got to show you a little bit of this over on X. And this is related. This is a plane being followed by, of course, orbs. And something very bizarre happens. Check this out.
It's 370. And zoom right here. There's the second one. And
Cadbury frozen treats. Guaranteed not to last.
This is BridgeBox. Yes, even more streaming telly.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Okay, so he's talking about these things rotating around the plane. See that?
Shawnee, there's about 6 or 7 of us. We're full on family, isn't it? It's really cool.
They start oscillating. Check that out. And then all of a sudden the plane disappears. That is bizarre. Now, of course, the question is this even real? Could be, I mean, honestly, it could be fake. These days, this is like the best time for UFOs to just be everywhere because, like, you can just say, oh, it's not real. But, I mean, the fact is all these people in New Jersey are seeing them and taking videotapes, and they're clearly not professional video editors, and they're not using AI to do this. So, but it's just like, you know, there's always a way to explain away everything, you know what I mean? But honestly, when the ones I'm going to show you in a minute, like, you're not going to believe it. So we have this right here, a comment. This was something posted on Reddit a little bit before this all started. I think maybe a couple weeks before it all started. 2 months ago, during a talk at Yale.
Shawnee, I like how we play a vid, and if they start going in the bad territory, we don't watch it. We change to another video. I like how we do that because when it's time to change, everyone's already agreed with me that this isn't a good video.
Danny Sheehan said aliens are coming to intervene because they now can't allow us to destroy the life-generating capabilities of the planet, and the GOV knows this. And he goes, apparently he's doing a lecture at Yale, and this guy's a lawyer. And he's talking about aliens coming. He went on to say your friends and family to prepare because it's going to be a shock. Then he goes, let's examine this. Danny's a lawyer for both Rush and Elizondo. It would make sense he would know things like this from an attorney-client privilege. Also, Danny's not bound to any security, of course, clearances or NDAs. He can just go publicly say what he knows. I mean, who knows? Maybe there's something going on there. Maybe he is telling us something he knew. we've seen this on 4chan and Reddit. They'll say something before it happens. Maybe he knew something, right? Now you have this one as well. This one's very bizarre. This is a obviously that one right there is a plane. What are these? Now it sounds like drones in the background though. So it's so weird. Why? You know, it's so weird because before this all started, I remember Elon tweeted something about like thousands of drones being able to work together to do, you know, military or whatever stuff. And that was right before this all started. And then all of a sudden we start seeing these drones everywhere. And then we start seeing orbs in them. Something weird is going on here, you know what I mean? These could be drones. I don't know what these are. Balloons, drones, what are they? Orbs? Who knows? I mean, at this point, we don't know what those are. It's too far away. It's hard to tell. Of course, our wonderful press is telling us nothing nefarious. Gives first statement on New Jersey, you know, drones. You guys are worrying about nothing. Don't worry about it. There's nothing there. Don't worry. This weird one in a tree, don't worry about that. It just looks strange. I know it looks really strange. This is from a different camera. Oh, look, we got an ad. Give me a second here. I'm going to get past the ad here. This is on Casper Site's channel. Okay, check this out. Look, it's moving. Look at that. What's going on there?
Oh,
Dude, there's
Bas,
some
good day,
webbing inside
mate.
it. And it's got like
Bas, I'm just about to hang up, bro.
it's on it, and it's like a jelly thing. It looks like a jelly thing. There's another angle of this.
Looks like a Moab.
Yeah, here we are. Look at that. Does that look like a normal drone to you? Now, this is the camera. So then he pulls out and just takes a photo, zooms in, and this is what it looks like zoomed in. Does that look like a drone to you? It looks like an amoeba. It literally looks like a giant amoeba floating.
No, Paul's tomorrow night. He's tomorrow night. Today's Thursday, isn't it? Oh, it's Friday. I thought it was Thursday. I'll be doing Mike tomorrow, mate. I didn't realise.
And got stuck in a tree. That's what it looks like to me. That don't look like anything I've ever seen in my life. I don't know about you. That does not look normal. At any rate, so of course, but remember, our wonderful beloved press told you there's nothing weird going on. It's just all completely normal. Just ignore the amoeba in your tree, all right? Just ignore the amoeba in your tree. Ignore the Klingon ship flying overhead. Ignore the orb that talks to you. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, just ignore all of it. It's just completely not real. It's just in your head. You're seeing things in it.
Yeah, I'll do it tomorrow. Last, it'll be the first video we watch tomorrow. Mike from around the world.
It's not real. There's something. I don't know. You have this one here. This one's kind of weird as well. I mean, this one is far more explainable than the last one. This one, you could just say they put a laser on top and bottom of it. It's just shooting a laser up. I mean, you could literally say that. You could theoretically make something do this. But it does look very strange. And this isn't the first one I've seen. I've seen numerous do this. This is probably the third, or I think this is the third video I've seen like this, where you got some weird laser stuff going on. And again, it has something flying near it. It's like really strange. They all fly in packs. Of course, we got these outlets coming out saying it's probably just a plane, okay? That amoeba in your tree is probably just a plane. Don't worry about it, okay? It's just a plane, bro. It's just a plane, okay? It's just a plane floating in your tree with a weird look to it, you know? Just be calm, okay? If you see some weird thing come out of it and start, you know, skedaddling around, just ignore it, okay? It's nothing. It's normal. It's completely normal for this stuff to happen. At any rate, so I think it's kind of ridiculous. I mean, honestly, we were talking about this months ago. I didn't think they would try this. I actually didn't think they would try this. My researcher was telling me this is probably what they're going to try. And I'm like, I don't, man. Come on. They're going to try aliens, really? Is that what they're going to try as their last little...
Typical Sean. He comes on early just as I forget it's Friday.
plan or last straws to pull up the alien card? Really? He's like, yeah, I think that's what they're... I'm like, really, man? Come on, man. Are they going to try to sell that to us? They're going to try to sell that to us? Apparently, yeah. Apparently, he was right. That's what they're trying to sell us. And it seems like it's not letting up. Matter of fact, I'm seeing more and more videos on this. Again, does that look like a plane to you? Does that look like a drone to you? Just let me know what you think, all right? It's got a green light on it, too. This is what's so weird. It has this green light on it, and it has some moving things moving inside it, too. What in the world, bro? Look at that. It's got lights on the bottom. It's got a green light here. It's stuck in the tree, man. I would like to see him take it down and, show us what it is. Maybe he's too scared to cut it down. I don't know. Yeah, that's pretty crazy, man. Getting things stuck in your tree now. I don't know, man. We also have we have a couple other stories real quick I wanted to get into really fast. We have, of course, this Brett Cooper situation, I guess we'd call it. We're talking about, she's a YouTuber, and apparently she's parted ways from the Daily Wire. Apparently it wasn't as amicable as they would have let us on to believe. This video is actually from way before she left. This guy said he had some sort of inside scoop on the whole thing.
But once she crossed Jeremy Boring and Jeremy was pissed, he decided he would replace her with her best friend. And so he made a contract offer that Reagan apparently could not refuse.
And this guy's making this video before this even happened. Let me go make sure I'm right. Because this was like a month ago he made this video. Oh, not a month. It was like 20 days ago or something. Let me see here. Comment section with Brett Cooper, which of course no longer is her. But let's see her last episode. Last episode was 11 days ago. Yeah, so this was way before. This was about 10 days before her last episode that he put this out. So he's talking about what happened before it happened. All right? Let's listen a little bit more.
And he is now replacing Brett with Reagan slowly until the expiration of the current contract with.
So, I mean, she crossed, Brett Cooper crossed Jeremy Boring. And he's the God King. You can't cross the God King. Okay? Yeah, here's the God King right himself. Oh my goodness. It says right here, lowercase God King. So he's like a really low God King, apparently. This is, of course, you put that in.
Wow.
Remember that whole Christ is, king, that whole thing that came out? And he was like saying that you shouldn't say it because it might offend somebody.
See you tomorrow, Rose.
This guy, he said in some circumstances it could offend somebody, right? So then that was probably when he put this lowercase in front of his name. I'm a God King, just not a really big God King. Yeah, bro, you're not a God King, bro. You're really not. And a lot of people are definitely seeing way through all this stuff. And so we have this other clip here as well. Check this out.
Her best friend, who was her maid of honor at her wedding, they apparently allegedly gave her acting classes to help her imitate Brett's mannerisms. No. And when I was talking to a girl with the family I was staying with before, she's like an 18-year-old chick that loves Brett Cooper. She's a total super fan. She was like, yeah, the Reagan episodes are kind of weird.
Welcome back to the comment section. So obviously, I talked Harbrand into a whole new stratosphere of woke confusion. Concerned about feminism, I'm concerned about the growing gender divide. But before we get into today's episode, make sure you like this video.
She actually has kind of a similar voice,
yeah.
a little bit, and also like similar mannerisms. It's like she's a clone. She's a clone, my friends. She's trying.
I'm going to take this back for a sec. Okay, guys, I'm out.
Like
see you tomorrow.
Chick that loves Brett Cooper. She's a total
God bless
super fan.
everyone.
She was like, yeah, the Reagan episodes are kind of weird.
Welcome back to the comment